The door does not await you. Rather, you are the one being sought. The door materializes when logic has relaxed its grasp and silence blankets all. Floating within an endless void, the door has no exterior world, only a gaping interior that leads straight within your very essence. And what lies beyond it? More doors, and more, and even more. Strangely, becoming relative, not a scroll but an autonomously fated feedback loop, each advance more profound than the last, and a reflection of everything you were too scared to admit you intend to seek. If you step out into this world, nothing shall be altered. But you, yourself. It begins, as many strange things do, in a place you've always known but can't recall having visited. The door stands there, not waiting, not beckoning, simply existing, with the quiet certainty of something that was never meant to be found, yet always would be. It is not marked, it is not locked, it is not even fully closed. But it is very clear that whatever lies behind it does not begin in the room you are standing in. This is not a passage from one place to another. This is a passage from one question to another. The door opens inward. That detail feels important, though you can't say why. It opens not with resistance or welcome, but with inevitability, like an eye blinking open or a thought that has finally grown tired of hiding. There is no sound, no hinge to creak. It simply unfolds into darkness. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something deeper than light, something denser than shadow. You step forward and realize with a quiet pang that the floor doesn't begin beneath your foot. It stretches only after you commit to the motion. The threshold is reactive, reconstituting itself around the shape of belief. The first room is small, familiar in the way that an old dream is familiar. Edges blurred, proportions slightly wrong, everything drifting just outside of logic's reach. The wallpaper resembles memories you thought were lost, the pattern flickering with half-formed symbols, spiral constellations, interlocked eyes, hands reaching toward vanishing stars. There is another door ahead, nearly identical to the first, but subtly aged, as if time moved faster just within its frame. Its handle is warmer, its breath deeper. When you reach for it, a pulse travels up your arm, a quiet reminder that the journey isn't linear. It's cellular, recursive. This is the paradox of the inward path. Each door brings you deeper, but never closer. Each opening reveals another layer of yourself pretending to be an answer. You begin to notice that nothing ever fully closes behind you. The rooms remain, suspended like thoughts you never finished thinking. And even when you've left them, their presence lingers, echoing in the weight of your limbs, humming faintly in the rhythm of your breath. As you move deeper, the architecture becomes more unstable, more alive. Hallways twist, looping back into themselves with DreamLogic precision. A staircase ascends and returns to the base it came from. A corridor narrows until you must crawl, only to widen suddenly into a vast black atrium filled with floating doors, each one turning slowly on invisible hinges. Some open onto memories, others onto nothing. One opens into an infinite mirror, your reflection walking endlessly away from you. You begin to lose track of how many doors you've passed through. Numbers lose meaning. Time forgets its direction. Your body, once solid, begins to feel like a suggestion. You start to notice the moments when your hands flicker, briefly transparent, like your presence is being reconsidered by this space itself. Behind one door, A room holds only a chair and a string descending from the ceiling. When you pull the string, the room shrinks. When you let go, it expands. You do this for a while, fascinated, until you forget why you entered. Eventually, you move on. Another door leads to a library with no books, only shelves labeled with concepts. Childhood you refused, truths you repeated until they became fiction, dreams borrowed from strangers. You run your fingers along the empty spines, and your fingertips begin to itch with phantom memories. One shelf has your name etched into it, but in a language you do not speak. You open a drawer labeled "Moments That Could Have Changed You," and find it empty. Somewhere further in, you find a room filled with water, but only ankle deep. The walls stretch upward into blackness, no ceiling in sight. In the center floats a single door, unattached to anything, softly glowing beneath the surface. You must submerge to reach it. As you do, you hear whispers, not behind you, but from within. Thoughts you never voiced, fears you denied, questions you were too afraid to ask. They aren't cruel, just unfinished. They ask gently if you still want answers. You pass through the door underwater. On the other side, you emerge into a desert made of static. The sand crackles with forgotten information. You kneel to pick up a handful and feel it vibrate with phrases you've heard your entire life, all layered on top of each other, some in your own voice, some not. You let the grains fall through your fingers, and each word vanishes before it touches the ground. You realize that by this point, you're no longer sure what you look like. Mirrors offer different versions, some older, some younger. One shows you with no face at all, only a swirling void where features should be. Another shows someone you don't recognize, but who somehow feels like someone you once were. You begin to suspect that the deeper you go, the less you are discovering who you are, and the more you are becoming the journey itself. Eventually, you reach a door with no handle, no frame, just a rectangle outlined in starlight, hovering in open darkness. It does not open in the traditional sense. It breathes. When you step through, there is no room, only a sensation. The sensation of being unmade and remembered simultaneously. A flickering awareness that you are standing in the mind of a question. And the question is not one you can ask with words. You linger here, not out of fear, but out of reverence, because this space is not passive. It observes. You can feel its gaze like a tide, gentle, ancient, and indifferent. You are not being judged. You are being heard. It's in this moment you understand. This place, these infinite rooms, these recursive doors, they are not a maze. They are not a trap. They are a mirror. Every threshold you crossed was a thought. Every room, a belief you once carried. Every door, a version of you trying to become real. The final door, if it can be called that, does not appear. It emerges, slowly, from within. You realize it was never ahead of you. It was never something you would arrive at. It was something you had to become. And when you do, the space shifts. The silence deepens. There is no resolution, no great revelation, no voice proclaiming purpose. Only a gentle collapsing of the need for those things. The door opens once more. You step through and find yourself back where you began. But this time, the handle is in your hand, and the room is breathing with you, and the door is still opening. Forever, because that's what inward means. Not a place you reach, but a shape you take. There is a moment, not measurable by clocks, not registered by calendars, when the self begins to shimmer, not in light but in awareness, a faint pulse, a vibration between thoughts. It arrives not as birth, but as memory, not of an event but of a presence. It begins long before your name was spoken, long before language took your breath and sliced it into meaning. You were never born in the traditional sense. You simply began recalling yourself. At first it's subtle, a feeling that something preceded your first breath, that your earliest memory is already mid-sentence, already part of something unfolding long before you were invited in. You remember faces you've never seen, emotions attached to no story, a sense of longing that has no object. These aren't hallucinations, they're echoes, not from the past, but from beneath the illusion of time. You didn't enter the world. The world condensed around your observation of it. What you call birth was a collision of perception and forgetting, a carefully orchestrated forgetting. And what followed was not growth, but recollection, a return, not a journey forward. Every first word, every step, every question, they weren't discoveries. They were reminders, rehearsals of truths your soul had already whispered into the void before bones and skin ever formed to house it. Even your name, assigned, repeated, believed, was a spell to tether you, not to your essence, but to a version of yourself constructed by repetition and response. You grew into that name like moss grows into stone, unaware of the shape it was taking. You were praised for remembering the right things, for aligning with the narrative, for learning the steps to the dance you were born in the middle of. But what you were really doing was forgetting everything else. Children are not blank slates. They are overflowing ones, spilling with inherited patterns, ancestral scripts, echoes from dream corridors. But the adult world rewards forgetting. It trims the pages, reshapes the margins, replaces the wild text of intuition with the standardized format of belonging. Eventually, you stopped remembering the before. Not because it vanished, but because the noise grew louder. The external world, with its objects and rules, demanded your attention. Memory dimmed, awareness narrowed, and you were applauded for this shrinking, called it maturity, progress, realism. But underneath, the old knowledge curled like roots, waiting for silence, for cracks in the concrete. There are signs, always, déjà vu that lingers too long, dreams that feel more like places than stories, a stranger's face that makes your chest ache with recognition. And there are questions that no teacher answers. Why do I feel like I've been here before? Why do some truths feel older than my body? Why does some knowledge arrive not through study, but through stillness? You start to notice that remembering is not tied to time, that memory isn't always backward. Sometimes it comes from ahead, a future self brushing against the edge of your current form, sending ripples through the present. These are not predictions, they are invitations, hints that you are larger than your chronology, deeper than your reflection. And so the paradox arrives. If you were never truly born, where did you begin? There is no fixed origin, no singular starting point. You are not a point. You are a pattern, a recurring wave across the sea of being, a frequency tuning itself into flesh again and again like a thought trying to make itself understood. You are less a person, more a process, less a being, more a becoming. Identity becomes harder to hold. You find yourself slipping out of stories that once felt solid, roles feel like costumes, achievements like echoes. You watch yourself say things, do things, and wonder who decided. Was that the remembered self or the version built from forgetfulness? You begin to suspect that many of your desires are not yours. They were installed, programmed, remembered, yes, but not from the core. At night, in dreams, the old memories return with no filter. You walk into rooms that breathe. You converse with eyes, not mouths. You touch objects that teach you things without words. You remember how light feels before it becomes sight, how space hums when unobserved. You wake up and cannot explain these places, but you know them. You've known them longer than you've known the shape of your own hands. The body itself becomes a kind of mnemonic device. Every sensation, every illness, every scar, a page in a book written in the dialect of the nervous system. Some aches are not physical. They are instructions, buried fragments of forgotten selves trying to surface through tension. That tightness in your chest when someone says your name in the wrong tone. The tremor behind your eyes when you stand at the edge of something vast and unknowable. These are reminders. The universe, too, seems to participate in the remembering. Patterns repeat with too much elegance to be accidental. Numbers, symbols, events, all aligned like verses in a poem whose author remains unseen. You notice synchronicities more often, not because they are increasing, but because you are tuning in. Your awareness is expanding past the filter of rational probability, opening instead to the language of resonance. And here, another paradox. The more you remember, the less there is to know. Truth reveals itself not as accumulation, but as subtraction. The layers fall away, fear, expectation, identity, control, and what remains is startling in its simplicity. You are not the container, you are the current, the thought, the observer dancing inside the observed. You are the breath that watches itself breathe. You are memory learning to speak in the present tense. You were never born. Not really. You only stepped into this chapter of yourself, picked up a thread you've followed before, though in other forms, in other lifetimes, on other levels of reality, you no longer measure by stars and calendars. Your consciousness is not local. It is nested, one dream inside another, each layer pretending to be final until the next opens. There is no bottom to this remembering. It goes inward forever. Each insight reveals the illusion of the one before it. Each awakening is a doorway, and every doorway turns into another question. Who is remembering? Who is watching the watcher? Eventually, you let go of the need to answer. You begin to remember how to feel instead, how to rest in the shape of not knowing, how to hold paradox like breath. You stop chasing the origin story. You stop trying to define yourself in words. You start to listen. And the silence finally remembers you back. It is in that space, in the hush between concepts, in the pause between thoughts, that the truest remembering happens. Not with logic, not with proof, but with presence. You were never born. You are being recalled. There is a mirror in a room that does not exist until you notice it. It waits, not out of patience, but out of certainty. It knows in a way you do not, that your gaze will eventually arrive, that all eyes at some point return to the surface that undoes them. This mirror does not reflect what is. It reflects what was missing and what was never yours. The first time you see it, you flinch, not because of what you see, but because something is off by just enough to feel wrong. Your face looks familiar, but not current, not present. It looks like a version of you that stayed behind while you became something else. And the longer you stare, the more you begin to notice that the mirror is not showing your image at all. It is showing the negative space you left behind. The you that could have been. The self-shaped shadow that once stood beside the path you chose. Your absence, fossilized in glass. It doesn't blink when you do. It doesn't breathe when you inhale. It holds still, waiting for you to notice the difference. Mirrors are supposed to show symmetry. This one reveals subtraction. At first you rationalize. Trick of the light, a smudge, a lag in perception, but deep down you understand. This is not a reflection. It's a witness, a memory, not of what happened, but of what didn't. You reach out, and the image does not follow. You speak, and the mouth on the other side stays closed. It is not ignoring you. It is remembering you differently. There is a strange comfort in the encounter, a quiet acknowledgement that your absence has a shape, and that shape has been waiting. Not accusing, just existing, like a photograph taken from the future of a person who never arrived. You start to see the mirror everywhere, not just in objects, but in people, in conversations that echo versions of yourself you no longer align with, in choices that reflect desires you thought you buried, in strangers who look at you as though they've met a ghost, and you wonder, am I the ghost? Have I been haunting the idea of myself? The mirror doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. It simply shows you the ripple of everything left undone. The dreams you shelved, the apologies unsent, the words you rehearsed but never said, the lives you almost lived. All of it still breathing on the other side of the glass. There is no shame in the mirror, no blame, only memory. But it's not memory as recollection, it's memory as structure. The frame of who you are is composed as much by what you chose not to become as by what you did. Absence defines form. The whole sculpts the bowl. The silence shapes the song. This mirror teaches without language. It shows that identity is not a singular sculpture, but a shifting contour made of echoes. That selfhood is not solid, but reactive. That every decision you've ever made radiates outward, carving shadows of alternatives that persist, not in time, but in thought. And now they are here, looking back at you. You begin to wonder if the mirror sees you at all, or if it only sees your outline. The impression you've left behind in this reality, like a footstep that stays long after the body has moved on. You realize that reflection is not a replica, it's a reminder. A soft whisper that says, you were more than this, you still are. But not here, not in this version, not in this mirror. You close your eyes hoping to silence the presence, but the mirror remains behind your eyelids. It has memorized you, not as a figure, but as a possibility. You open your eyes and the mirror finally moves, not to match you, but to turn away. It no longer needs to observe. It remembers you fully, even in absence, especially in absence. You reach for it one last time, not to touch it, but to acknowledge it, to say goodbye to everything you didn't become. And as your fingers hover over the glass, it vanishes. The room, the mirror, the moment. Gone. Only a strange warmth remains in your palm, as if something remembered you back, There is a stillness so deep it feels like pressure, a weightless hush that doesn't lift but holds, not because it wants to keep you grounded, but because it has never learned to fly. This is where gravity sleeps. You enter a room with no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just space, soft and endless like velvet stretched across the bones of time. You do not fall, you do not float. You remain suspended, cradled in an absence so complete it becomes its own kind of presence. And somewhere inside this emptiness, you feel it, gravity dreaming. It's not what you thought. It isn't strict or stern or inevitable. It isn't some unseen tyrant dragging all things down. Here, it is shy, gentle, longing, a dreamer. You begin to understand. Gravity has always wanted to fall, not pull, not anchor, not define, but to surrender. It holds the stars together, yes, but only because it doesn't know how to let go. Its embrace is desperate, not cruel. It is clinging not to objects, but to meaning. It wants connection. It wants to be part of the dance, not the force that ends it. You think of the way your feet have always kissed the floor without question, the comfort of knowing where down is, the stability of rootedness. But now you wonder, what if gravity's pull isn't strength, but a secret ache? What if every step you've ever taken was held by something that didn't want to hold you, only wanted to be understood? There's a moment when your body starts to disobey. Not violently, elegantly. The rules loosen, the shape softens, the edges of you begin to blur, and then you start to fall. Not down, not up, just inward. But this falling isn't movement. It's awareness deepening, a spiral of sensation, a collapsing of definitions. You realize you've never actually fallen before. You've only responded to the idea of descent. What's happening now is different. It's not about going somewhere. It's about becoming less certain of where you are. Below you, or maybe within you, gravity pulses. It murmurs. Not in language, but in rhythm. You feel it like a heartbeat, like a thought, too old for words. It dreams of release, of floating, of being held, for once, by something greater than itself. The dream is fragile, circular. It loops. What if I let go? What if I stop holding? What if I fall? What if I fall? What if I... The question repeats like breath, like orbit. You recognize it as your own, because you too are tired of holding things together, of being the weight-bearing beam in rooms that shake, of being the axis around which everything must spin. You realize you've confused stillness with stability, but stillness in its deepest form is surrender. And gravity, this silent architect of galaxies, has always known that. It only pretends to pull. What it really wants is to be pulled. You begin to unravel, not in chaos but in softness. The scaffolding of certainty collapses gently, like the final exhale of a house that's been holding its breath for centuries. Your thoughts drift like leaves in water. You are no longer a shape. You are no longer a name. You are a current, a tide within a tide, a spiral nested in larger spirals. Around you, the room begins to change. Or maybe it's you changing into the room. The distinction evaporates. You are both the falling and the gravity, the dream and the one dreaming it. And in this blur, you remember something. You are not pulled to the earth. You are called by it, called by every tree whose roots dig deeper in longing, by every river that curves its way toward union, by every stone that has waited patiently to be seen, by every sky that has only ever wanted to fall upward. You remember that gravity is not a law, it's a desire, a yearning of matter to feel close again, to not be alone. And in that moment, everything that held weight in your life begins to shift. Guilt softens, expectation loosens, control evaporates. You realize that you've mistaken heaviness for meaning, but not all burdens are yours to carry. Not all anchors serve. Some simply keep you from drifting into the freedom you've forgotten how to trust. And as the last layer of gravity's dream washes through you, you feel something extraordinary. Lightness, not the absence of weight, but the presence of grace. The kind of lightness that comes from no longer needing to define the fall. The kind of flight that doesn't resist gravity, but dances with it. You are falling still. But now it is not descent. It is devotion, a giving in, a becoming, a recognition that nothing in you is broken, only held too tightly by dreams that weren't yours to keep. You open your arms, and so does gravity, and together you fall into each other, into everything, into nothing. And the dream continues. There is a moment, impossible to time, impossible to measure, when you realize you've stopped falling. Not because you've landed, but because the concept of falling has lost meaning. Descent and ascent have folded into one another like mirrors facing mirrors. You are not moving through space. You are space, remembering its own movement. A pocket of awareness within an infinite loop of intention. Around you there is no ground. There is no sky. Only rhythm, only pulse. Only the quiet hum of unseen architecture, softly unraveling. You understand now that gravity was never a thing, never an object or a force. It is a longing, pure and simple, a pull not toward mass, but toward union, a yearning embedded in every atom to be less alone, to merge, to collapse the distance between self and other, to forget separation, if only for a moment. Even black holes, those monstrous hearts of galaxies, are not devourers. They are concentrators of desire, points where gravity dreams the loudest, not to destroy, but to return everything home. You begin to see echoes of this everywhere in your life. The way people gravitate to each other without knowing why. The pull of eyes meeting across rooms. The ache of silence begging to be shared. The magnetic tension of unspoken truths suspended between bodies. This, too, is gravity, emotional gravity. The invisible field where souls orbit, searching for resonance. You recall how many times you mistook that pull for fate, how many times you followed it blindly, assuming it would lead to fulfillment, only to find yourself lost in another spiral. But now, with weight stripped of its mask, you realize not every gravity must be obeyed, not every pull leads to meaning. Some are echoes of unresolved dreams, pulling you back into loops you've already outgrown. But still, how beautiful the yearning, how sacred the ache. You think of gravity as the first prayer, the one uttered before language, before form. The call that shaped the stars, drew breath into lungs, turned dust into eyes. And you wonder, what if gravity itself is sentient? What if it watches us, not from above, but from within? What if every fall you've ever feared was a gesture of trust, an invitation to return to something older than safety? In this formless place, You begin to meet gravity not as an external truth, but as a companion. It doesn't speak, but it listens. It doesn't hold you down. It holds you together. It's the quiet agreement between all your pieces to remain whole. And in that agreement, a question arises, so subtle it could be missed, yet so profound it reshapes your internal landscape. What if I let go, and nothing falls apart? You feel it move through you like light through a prism, a scattering of resistance, a quiet exhale of old identities that were only ever scaffolding. You don't need to hold them anymore. You never did. The dream of gravity begins to shift. Not end, just transform. It is no longer a weight. It is a pulse. The pulse of presence, of here-ness, of being in this body, in this breath, in this precise fragment of time. You are still falling. But now the fall is sacred. You are not falling through the world. You are falling through yourself. Through every forgotten version. Through every memory that held your spine too tightly. Through every belief that told you to stay small. Each moment of release peels back a layer. Each moment of surrender expands the frame. You begin to glow, not with light, but with space. There is so much space in you now. Room for wonder, room for paradox, room for not knowing without fear. You think of planets circling suns, of electrons spinning probability, of people orbiting each other in cafes, subways, conversations, each one held by something they cannot see, pulled towards something they do not fully understand. Love, curiosity, grief, memory. These are all forms of gravity. And maybe, just maybe, so is dreaming. You reach the core of the fall and find no center. Only another spiral, only another invitation. And so you let yourself fall again. Not because you're lost, but because you are finally willing to be carried. And in that final fall, you feel it, gravity lets go too. There is a path you must walk, but every time you take a step, the destination halves in distance. The garden stretches ahead, fragrant with impossible geometry. Each stone you cross is smooth and intentional, but no matter how far you go, you never arrive. This is not a failure. It is the rule. It is ZENO'S gift, his paradox planted deep into the soil, growing in curves instead of roots. The garden is quiet, not with the stillness of emptiness, but the attention of something ancient. It listens as you walk. It listens as you hesitate. Every motion is acknowledged, every pause magnified. You begin to understand this is not a place to pass through. It is a place that passes through you. The air smells of unspoken conclusions, the leaves whisper in algorithms, and the trees shift imperceptibly when you turn your head. The path is lined with strange symbols that change shape when you look away. There are no signs, but there is direction, a rhythm. You feel compelled to keep moving, even if the next step always feels like it's taking you half as far as the last. With each step, your feet learn the rules and your thoughts begin to bend. You realize the path was not built to be completed. It was designed to be approached, to be pursued infinitely without reaching. The garden doesn't require your arrival. It requires your attention. And in that attention, time behaves differently. You start to lose the weight of expectation, the burden of completion. A strange lightness begins to grow. The idea of a final moment dissolves. What remains is process. What remains is presence. You walk for hours. Though you no longer measure time in minutes, you measure it in questions, in half-solved thoughts, in suspended truths. You notice a butterfly fluttering beside you in a loop, tracing smaller and smaller circles, never quite landing. You feel kinship with it. You begin to see that everything here exists in fractions, caught in transition. A flower always mid-bloom, a fruit perpetually ripening, a stream forever about to meet the pond. Nothing finishes, nothing freezes, everything is always almost. You pass a gate that is always in your periphery but never in front of you. When you try to face it, it repositions itself just beyond your direct line of sight. It's there, but never here. Just like the end point of the path, perceptible but unreached. The garden is not cruel. It is deliberate. It teaches by structure, not by answer. The lesson is written into the walk itself. You pause at a stone bench that appears beside the path. You sit, though you don't remember feeling tired. The moment you sit, you feel the garden lean in closer, as if asking, "What have you learned so far?" You have no words, only a sensation, a mixture of surrender and sharpened attention. You've learned that striving is a form of forgetting, that rushing is a kind of blindness. The garden does not speak, but it responds in kind. A breeze rustles the trees, and the air briefly smells like a memory you cannot name. A warm kitchen, a half-finished sentence, someone waiting. You rise again and continue, but something is different now. The path is the same, but your way of walking has changed. You are no longer walking to arrive. You are walking to be. Each half-step becomes an act of reverence. Every breath aligns with movement. You begin to notice how the world unfolds in rhythm with your attention. When you look closely, the stones glow faintly. When you slow down, the sky deepens in color. When you listen, you hear the garden humming, a chord that never resolves, a song written without an ending. Eventually, you meet a fork in the path. One trail spirals upward into a floating grove. The other winds downward, vanishing into mist. You hesitate, then laugh, because you realize both lead nowhere and everywhere. You take the spiral. With each curl of the path, your perspective tilts. You begin to see the garden from above, and it reveals its structure to you. A fractal, a recursive bloom, a geometry of thresholds. Each loop contains smaller versions of itself, like thought nested in thought, decision inside hesitation. From above you see other walkers, each moving through their own endless garden. No two paths cross, but all of them echo one another. Some walk quickly, some stop entirely, a few walk backward, but none arrive. And yet all are changed. You see one version of yourself below, paused beside a tree, another version ahead, further along. Are these memories, possibilities, or simply reflections echoing across dimensional mirrors? You reach the crest of the spiral grove, and for a moment you feel complete stillness. Not the stillness of arrival, but of insight. You realize the destination has always been here, not in space, in experience. The garden wasn't built to delay you. It was built to reveal you. It peels away your impatience. It shows you the map of your thinking. Every half-step mirrored the halves of your mind. Rational slicing, emotional dividing, spiritual reaching. You look down and see that the path has formed the shape of a question mark, the punctuation of seeking, the shape of the infinite half-step. the curve that never quite closes, that always leaves a gap. And you understand Zeno not as a philosopher of impossibility, but as a gardener of perception. He was never trying to prove motion false. He was showing us how our need for completion fractures the present. The path continues ahead, of course. You are free to walk it. You are also free to sit. You are even free to leave, though you suspect that departure is just another half-step, another segment in the recursion. You are not trapped. You are traced, sketched over and over in the geometry of becoming. You close your eyes. The garden continues without you, and with you, simultaneously, because somewhere in its soil, Zeno's paradox is still blooming. Not to stop your progress, but to invite you into the infinite intimacy of the step you're already taking. Time has always ticked, but you never noticed what it was counting. You assumed minutes, hours, days, but now, in this place, surrounded by clocks, with no numbers, no hands, no faces, only quiet, rhythmic pulses, you begin to wonder if time was never measuring duration, but doubt. Here, clocks don't strike 12. They hesitate, they hum, they click forward only when asked a question. The first clock you find sits in the center of a room shaped like a spiral staircase collapsed into itself. It's built not of metal, but of woven thought. Each strand of it hums softly, and every tick echoes like a breath caught in the chest. You approach. It does not move, but as soon as you wonder why isn't it moving, it ticks once. A slow, soft, deliberate click like a drop of water landing in a still pool. This is how you learn. Questions move time forward. You ask another, "Where am I?" And the sound comes again. A notch, a pulse, not faster, not louder, just further. A soft shift into the next moment. The room doesn't change around you, but you do. Slightly. Your awareness slides, your edges blur, time responds, not to events, but to inquiry. Curiosity is what winds the mechanism. You wander through a corridor of timepieces, each stranger than the last. One clock is made of shadows, cast by nothing, shifting in patterns that make no physical sense. Another bleeds ink instead of sound. The ink pools into symbols across the floor, but only when you ask, "What do I fear the most?" The shapes it forms are not answers but mirrors. You realize this clock, too, moves with questions, personal ones. The deeper the question, the slower the ink flows, as if truth takes time to unfold its language. There's a clock shaped like an eye. Closed at first, but when you ask, "What have I refused to see?" it opens, slowly, painfully, and you feel something behind your ribs recoil. The tick that follows is loud, echoing off the walls, dragging the room forward by a fraction of a breath. The eye does not close again. It watches. You begin to understand that these are not clocks in the traditional sense. They do not track time. They create it, or perhaps more precisely, they permit it. Each question you ask allows a sliver of reality to slip forward, to continue unfolding. Without questions, time stagnates, the world holds its breath. Possibility pauses. You wonder, what happens if I stop asking? And just like that, the ticking halts. The light fades, not into darkness, but into stasis. The room is preserved mid-motion. Dust no longer floats. Sound no longer resonates. You exist, but without movement, without becoming. You are a still image, unfinished, unresolved. It is unbearable. The silence is not peaceful. It is suffocating. You open your mouth, not to speak, but to ask. Any question, any at all. What comes next? Tick. The room exhales. Motion returns. Your breath catches up to your body. A door you hadn't noticed slides open. Inside, a workshop. Clocks in various states of construction line the walls, some humming softly, some utterly still. A figure works in the far corner, faceless, undefined. Its hands move with impossible precision, weaving threads of thought into the gears of an unfinished timepiece. You watch as it installs a single question into its core. The mechanism shudders, then clicks. You step closer. The figure pauses and tilts its non-face toward you. It doesn't speak, but you hear something nonetheless, not a voice, but a resonance. Time does not pass, it is passed through. You don't understand, but the clock in your chest ticks once, and suddenly you do. You think of all the times you've waited, for healing, for clarity, for change. You think of how time felt like an adversary, a wall. But here, now, you see that time was not moving on without you. It was waiting for you to ask the right question, for you to participate, for you to choose curiosity over control. You move through the workshop, and each clock you pass responds to a different kind of inquiry. Existential questions ripple through time like seismic waves. Mundane questions click small cogs into place. Some clocks only respond to contradictions, others only to doubt. You realize time is not chronological, it's emotional, philosophical, epistemological. Its engine is wonder. You reach the end of the room and find one final clock, unfinished, its frame incomplete, its gears scattered. You place your hand on it and whisper the only question that feels honest now. Who am I when I am not certain? The gears align, slowly, beautifully, and the first tick resonates through you like the sound of recognition, not because it gave you an answer, but because it let the question live. And time once more begins. The library has no entrance. You arrive not by walking, but by wondering. One moment you're somewhere else, thinking about what might be next. The next moment you're here, standing before shelves that curve beyond sight, stacked with books that have not yet been written. The smell is familiar, ink, dust, and possibility. The air is heavy, not with silence, but with pause. Time doesn't move here, it waits. A figure moves between the aisles, tall, unhurried, neither old nor young. The librarian. They do not look at you, but they know you're here. They always do. Their hands drift over the spines, occasionally stopping to rest on a title that flickers, unreadable. These are not histories, they are futures, drafts of what might come next, some already abandoned, shelved, forgotten. You ask without speaking, what kind of library is this? The librarian answers in gestures, a hand extended, a nod toward the shelves. You approach. One of the books glows faintly as you near it. When you pull it free, it is warm, like it remembers being held before. The pages are blank, except for a single sentence that appears as you open it. You almost became this. The words land inside you like déjà vu. You flip further. More fragments emerge, images, conversations that never happened, paths you might have taken, people you might have become. all of it arranged like prose, uncertain, incomplete, but deeply familiar, a life unwritten, yet unmistakably yours. You realize this entire wing of the library is filled with tomorrows you once imagined, futures you dreamed and then dismissed, scenarios built from your wishes, your fears, your avoided decisions. Some are vivid, others faded, some hum with potential, others crumble when touched, but all of them waited for you to remember them. You turn to the librarian. Why save them? They regard you with eyes that feel like time folding inwards. The response arrives not in words, but in knowing. Because memory isn't just backward, it reaches forward too. You think of how often you've predicted your life, even unconsciously, how each hope shaped reality, how even the things you feared changed your path. Every possibility you imagined cast a shadow into the present, influencing what you chose, what you noticed, what you ignored. Here in this place, those echoes have form. Futures not taken are not gone. They're stored, labeled, preserved, some with reverence, some with regret. You wander through another aisle. This one is darker, colder. The books here tremble slightly on the shelves, as if they want to be left alone. You feel drawn to one and open it. Inside, a version of you shaped entirely by avoidance. The things you didn't say, the person you never forgave, the truth you pretended not to know. You close the book quickly, but it lingers. The librarian appears beside you, gently returning the volume to its shelf. They touch your shoulder, and for a moment your breath synchronizes with the hum of the archive. It's not condemnation, it's continuity. A reminder that even unchosen futures belong to the story. You move on. There is a section of half-formed possibilities, ideas you once toyed with, creative sparks never pursued, entire lives woven from single fleeting thoughts. What if I moved there? What if I said yes? What if I had tried? The books here are less linear, more chaotic. Some are written in symbols, others in shifting ink that never settles. But they are beautiful, untamed, electric. Then there is the quietest part of the library. These books are almost invisible, wrapped in stillness. You sense they contain futures that were possible, but only under impossible conditions. The ones that needed you to be someone else entirely. They ache with distance. You open one. It holds a love that could never be real. Another contains a revolution that required you to sacrifice everything. These tomorrows were never truly yours, but they needed to be dreamed, because even impossible futures shape the present. Eventually, you arrive at a small desk. There is a blank book waiting. The librarian gestures toward it. You hesitate. What is this one? The one you're still writing. It's empty now, but not for long. Your mind fills it instantly, with anxieties, with plans, with choices yet to be made. It shifts under your fingertips. This is the only book you can't leave behind, the one that followed you out, the only future that hasn't forgotten you. You ask the librarian if you can return. They do not answer. They simply nod and file a memory of this conversation under a title you haven't yet dreamed. You hold the blank book in your hands, its weight oddly precise, as though calibrated to the significance of your choices. There's a quiet within it, not emptiness but waiting. The pages aren't just blank, they're listening. You run your fingers over the edge of the paper, and for a moment you wonder if your hesitation has already been recorded. You ask the librarian, "What happens if I write nothing?" They tilt their head. You hear the reply, not aloud but in the echo of your own uncertainty. Then something else will write for you. The book responds to possibility, not only your intentions, but your inertia. Time, after all, is not neutral. It collects the residue of decisions unmade, questions unasked. To do nothing is not to escape authorship. It is to surrender the pen. You place the book down. It breathes. Ink begins to appear slowly, as though pulled from the marrow of thought. Not words you're writing, but thoughts you've been circling, desires you've muttered under breath, patterns you've rehearsed unconsciously, timelines you've flirted with but never married. They write themselves because you've already begun living them. You realize this entire library is not organized by chronology or subject, but by attention. The futures you gave the most attention to glow faintly, still pulsing. Others have withered into silence, and still more, the ones you disowned, vibrate like coiled questions, waiting for acknowledgement. The librarian walks beside you as you move toward a back corridor you hadn't noticed before. The hallway is narrow. The shelves curve inward. The books here are locked, not by key, but by will, futures too fragile to remember, or too dangerous. You run your hand along one and feel a sudden chill, a future you refused once, not because it was unkind, but because it asked too much of you, required a version of yourself that terrified you, braver, wilder, uncontainable. You ask, are all futures stored here? Only the ones you touched. You pause at that. Touched, not lived, not chosen, just imagined. Thought about for a moment, whispered to yourself late at night, sketched in fog on a mirror, dreamed once and then buried under obligation. That's all it takes for a tomorrow to find its place here. You reach the far wall of the corridor and find a mirror instead of shelves. It's large, rippling slightly at the edges like a memory held in water. The librarian gestures toward it. This shows what? The you that remembers all tomorrows. You hesitate. You've been learning so much from what you left behind, what you forgot, what you never followed through. But to see all of it at once, that feels like too much, too many paths, too many selves. But curiosity is heavier than fear. You step toward the mirror. At first, you see yourself as you are, present, simple, breathing. Then, slowly, your reflection begins to divide. One version steps left, another right. One smiles, one frowns, another folds their arms and looks away. They multiply, not chaotically but rhythmically, like notes in a chord. Each a harmonic of a different life you could have lived. Some wear clothes you don't own. Others carry burdens you never had to bear. Some look radiant. Some look weary. All of them are true. You feel overwhelmed, but the librarian steadies you with their presence. You realize this isn't about judgment. It's not even about choice. It's about integration. Every possibility you see, every version of you, is part of the vast constellation that forms your present. Even the versions that failed, even the ones you deny. The mirror fades. The corridor is still. Your breath is slow. You turn to the librarian. What happens when a future is fully forgotten? They lower their gaze. It waits, quietly, sometimes forever, sometimes until someone else finds it. You ask if you can take a book with you. The librarian says you already have. The blank one, the one still writing itself, the only one that can leave. You hold it again. Its cover feels different now, not heavier, but more alive, like it has been touched by your questions. You're no longer just the one who opens it. You are the one it's waiting for. The librarian walks with you toward the exit. Not a door, but a soft dissolve of space where thought becomes distance. You turn back once, and the shelves glow faintly, not as memory, as promise. You step out. The library fades, not behind you, but within, and somewhere a page turns. It looks like any other hotel at first, a modest facade, old-world charm, soft golden light glowing behind the windows like forgotten warmth. The bell above the door doesn't ring when you enter. It sighs, and in that exhale you cross a threshold not into space, but into concept. You've entered a paradox, an impossible place, a place where infinity doesn't stretch outward but folds in, over and over, like a map trying to hide the land it depicts. This is HILBERT'S hotel. It has infinitely many rooms, all numbered. Every one of them is occupied. And yet, this is where it gets strange. There is always room for more. The front desk clerk doesn't look up as you approach. Their hands move across a leather-bound ledger, scribbling not with ink but with shadows. You hesitate, unsure if you should speak, but they already know you're here. They slide a key across the counter, and you see your name engraved on it. Not the name you were given, but the one you haven't used since you stopped believing in who you used to be. Room infinity, they say without looking, down the hall, just after the last one. There's no map, no directions, but you find your way with unsettling ease. The corridor stretches forever. Doors line the walls in both directions, each slightly ajar, each humming softly with the lives playing out inside them. You peer into some as you pass. In room 1, a child version of you spins in circles, laughing with someone you don't recognize. Room 27 holds a version of you who stayed behind. They stare blankly at a television that never turns off. Room 311 sings. The voice is yours, but older, bruised, beautiful. Room 8008 is empty. The bed unmade, the mirror cracked, as if someone just left, but never checked in. The rooms are not in order. They respond not to logic, but to attention. The more you try to make sense of the numbering, the more it twists away from you. You stop counting and keep walking. The hallway curves subtly, and soon you realize it loops, not physically, but conceptually. You pass the same room multiple times, but it contains someone new each time. Or maybe it contains you in different moments of remembering. HILBERT'S hotel is not a building. It's a memory palace built on the foundation of paradox. Infinite rooms, infinite versions of you, all simultaneously full and waiting. It violates the intuition of space. It mocks the constraints of reason. But it welcomes you with eerie familiarity, because you've been here before. You just didn't know it had a name. Eventually, you reach your room. It doesn't exist, and yet it's exactly where you expect it to be. Room infinity, a door made of questions. The handle is cold. The key turns with the sound that resembles breath. You step inside. The room is not static. It rearranges itself as you observe it. One moment, a library. The next, a forest. Then, a dimly lit train car, gently rocking though no tracks exist. The room is not a place. It is a reflection. A container for your shifting self. A mirror made of experience. You sit on the bed, and the sheets whisper names you haven't heard in years. You begin to realize why you're here. This hotel houses every version of you that has ever existed, could have existed, will one day exist. Each room holds a self-paused mid-sentence, waiting for a conclusion you may never write. Some rooms are vibrant, echoing with lives fully lived. Others are quiet, neglected. Some whisper regrets like wind through curtains. Others pulse with triumphs you can't remember earning. You are both guest and staff here, both resident and architecture. You made this place without meaning to. Every choice you didn't make, every path you didn't follow, every emotion you denied, they all required somewhere to go. And here, they've made a home. You step into another room, not yours, but one nearby. A version of you sits cross-legged on the floor, painting the walls with stardust and equations. They look up and smile. I almost became you, they say, but I stayed curious too long. Another room, this one colder. You watch through a one-way mirror. The version of you inside has become still. Their movements are rigid. Their eyes don't blink. They built walls out of certainty and called it peace. You step away. In a distant hallway, you find a service door marked Overflow. Behind it, unnumbered rooms, crammed tight. These are selves that never stabilized. Versions of you that flickered once in a dream, then vanished. They twitch between forms. Some look like you, others like strangers. They speak in reverse. They cry in loops. You close the door gently. Later you discover the elevator. There are infinite buttons, not labeled by floors, but by feelings. Guilt, wonder, fear, longing, awe. Each button takes you to a vertical slice of yourself, a corridor organized by internal states rather than time. You press longing and descend. Here, the rooms are heavier, each door swollen with nostalgia. You see a version of you who waited too long to say what mattered. Another who walked away before the moment ended. Another who wrote letters but never sent them. They all glance at you, not with blame, but with recognition. In the opposite corridor, awe, the rooms sing. You pass a version of yourself dancing barefoot on an unknown planet. Another painting fire with bare hands. One sits in silence with a dying star whispering, "Thank you." You linger here longer than expected. Eventually, you return to room infinity. Inside, something has changed. The furniture has shifted. The light is softer. A small book lies open on the desk, its pages half written. You approach and realize it's a log of your visits, not just to this hotel, but to the idea of it. Every time you questioned who you were, every time you wondered what if, every time you imagined a different ending. They are all cataloged here. You write a new entry. Still wandering, still wondering, still here. As you stand to leave, a bell rings far off in the distance. A new guest has arrived. Perhaps another version of you. Perhaps someone dreaming this dream from the outside. You walk back to the front desk. The clerk looks up this time. Their face is familiar, not because you know them, but because they look like someone you might become. They smile. "Leaving already?" You nod. "Room's still yours," they say. "Always will be. You never really check out. You just change floors." As you exit the lobby, the hotel recedes behind you, not disappearing, but folding itself into a pocket of your awareness, waiting, watching, ready to open again when you next wonder who you might have been. You step into the present moment. It smells like rain. It hums with potential. And somewhere deep within your mind, a hallway of infinite doors shuffles quietly, preparing for your return. You don't remember falling asleep. You never do. It begins the way a crack forms in ice, suddenly without origin, spreading quietly through the surface of your awareness. One moment you're there, wherever there is. The next you're walking, barefoot, on stone, through a city that shouldn't exist. The buildings stretch impossibly tall, their spires like needles threading the sky. Light comes from nowhere and everywhere, thick beams suspended in midair, casting shadows in directions that contradict physics. Windows blink. Streets bend in spirals. Gravity shifts when no one is looking. And all around you echoes drift, soft voices murmuring language without consonants. You are dreaming, and yet none of this feels like it belongs to you. Your hands, when you look down, are almost yours, but not quite. A subtle change in shape, a scar that shouldn't be there, a skin tone that flickers at the edges. Your body carries memory, but not yours. Muscle remembers motion you've never performed. Your legs take you places you didn't intend to go. The streets remember you, but you don't remember them. You begin to understand the impossible. You are not in your own dream. You've woken up inside someone else's. The realization arrives like vertigo. The world doesn't collapse, but it shifts just slightly, as if your presence in it causes a tension in its fabric. You're not supposed to be here. And yet, the dream does not reject you. It adjusts. The city reshapes its skyline. A mural on a building's side changes colors as you pass. You hear a name whispered on the wind. It's not yours, but you turn your head instinctively. Somewhere, the dreamer is still dreaming. And somehow, you have become a guest in their inner world. You walk, you explore, you pass figures with blurred faces, projections, archetypes, thoughts given limbs. Some ignore you. Some watch you as if they're unsure whether you belong. A few bow slightly, as if they recognize a visitor from a parallel possibility. You begin to understand the rules, or rather, the lack of them. Here, movement is intent. Doors appear when you expect them. Streets turn when you stop anticipating them. Objects shift when you forget what they're supposed to be. You reach for a cup and grasp a memory instead. You open a door and find a question. At one corner, you enter a cafe filled with clocks. None of them keep time. Instead, they echo fragments of emotion. Guilt at 3:17, longing at 12:03, joy flickering at 7:41 and vanishing before it can repeat. You sit at a table and find a notebook. Its pages are filled with handwriting that looks like yours but isn't. You read a sentence aloud. I dreamt I was awake, but I was only remembering how to sleep. A figure sits across from you, unnoticed until now. Their face is both familiar and unknowable, like seeing yourself through the eyes of someone who never met you. They do not speak, but their presence radiates memory. Not yours, theirs. This is their dream. You are inside the space where they resolve the contradictions they can't face while conscious. You ask a question, though you're unsure why. Why am I here? They respond without moving their mouth. The answer folds into your thoughts as if it had always been there. Because you forgot where your own dream ended. A mirror appears beside the table. You glance into it and see your own sleeping body, distant, faint, like a reflection in dark water. It lies in a bed you don't recognize, under a sky made of static. Something about it frightens you, though you can't explain why. Not because you might not wake up, but because you might already have, and still be dreaming. The dream shifts again. You are now walking through a library where the books float. They orbit your head like satellites, each containing a different life. Some flicker in and out of existence, unstable. Others seem heavy with permanence. You reach for one and open it. Inside, a dream you never had, a childhood you didn't live, a face you don't recognize looking at you with the tenderness of someone who remembers a version of you that you never became. You realize the truth is more disorienting than you imagined. This is not a singular dream. This is the collective dream, a place where all unconscious minds touch, where thoughts bleed into each other, where memories mix like colors in water. You are not in someone else's dream. You are in the overlap, the dream space between dreamers, the liminal hall between identities. You pass other sleepwalkers like yourself, some lucid, some adrift. One hums to themselves and trails stars in their wake. Another weeps golden tears that dissolve the floor beneath them. A third holds a lantern filled with a miniature solar system. You exchange glances. Not recognition, but agreement. You are all trespassers, all pilgrims in the subconscious sprawl. In the center of the city there is a tower, tall, silent. It glows with no source. You feel pulled toward it as if it contained the logic behind all this dreaming. As you approach, the buildings around it distort, as though resisting your presence. But you keep moving, through alleys that erase themselves, over bridges that forget they existed. At the tower's base, a door stands ajar. You step through. Inside, a spiral staircase descending endlessly downward, not into darkness, but into thought. Each step you take triggers a memory not your own, a child's first lie, a soldier's hesitation, a mother's quiet doubt, a stranger's forgotten kindness. You begin to understand. The dream does not belong to one person. It is shared, inherited, stitched together from the collective sleep of billions, a library of all minds. You descend for what could be minutes or lifetimes. At the bottom, a chamber, empty except for a bed. On it, a body, yours or nearly yours. It breathes, slowly, steadily. You step closer. The eyes open. They are your eyes, but they are older, wiser, tired. The figure sits up, and for a moment, you and it exist in the same space. You do not speak, because language feels like too narrow a vessel. Instead, there is only the exchange of awareness, a mutual recognition of the layers within. You've been dreaming each other. The figure smiles, not with lips, but with presence. And then you wake up, in your own bed, in your own body, but not quite as you were. Because now you carry echoes, not just of this dream, but of many, of others, of selves you brushed past in the silent architecture of sleep. You rise, you move. The world feels the same, but every shadow is deeper, every silence more articulate. You look in the mirror, and for a flicker of a moment, your reflection blinks. Before you do, the first time you see the map, it's already halfway drawn. Not in ink, but in motion, lines forming as you walk, curves unfurling behind you like shadows that remember. It's not pinned to a table, not rolled up in leather, not stored in a satchel or sealed inside glass. It follows you, or perhaps more accurately, it becomes you. You find it by accident, or more precisely, it finds you when you stop looking for directions. You pause at a crossroads, unsure which way to turn, and suddenly it appears, a soft shimmer in the air, lines etching themselves across space, like memory deciding it's ready to be seen. At first you think it's a trick of the light, but it moves with purpose. Each step you take, it grows more intricate. A path appears beneath your feet only when you commit to the motion. A mountain rises ahead when you entertain a question. A forest coils inward when you hesitate. You begin to understand. This map does not show you the world, it builds it. This is not cartography, this is creation. You are no longer navigating space, you are authoring it. The terrain obeys attention, it emerges from thought. Hills rise when you reflect, valleys deepen when you feel doubt. Rivers chart their course in sync with the rhythms of your breath. Every decision carves new topography. Every belief anchors a landmark. There are no borders, only boundaries of perception. What you choose to know becomes real. What you refuse to see remains blank, undrawn, a silent void waiting for recognition. The sky above flickers with possible constellations rewriting themselves depending on the emotion you carry. One moment they form a question, the next an apology. You feel the land shifting underfoot, not in rebellion, but in response. You are not walking through a map. You are dreaming one into being. And yet, paradoxically, the map is not entirely yours. You notice forks in the path where terrain emerges too quickly, too detailed, as if drawn by someone else's memory. You walk past a grove of trees whose roots whisper names you've never spoken. You pass a bridge built from events you don't recall living, but that hum with the unmistakable signature of truth. You realize, with quiet awe, that you are not the only cartographer here. This is not your map alone. It is a shared canvas, a confluence of consciousness, where individual paths co-author landscapes, where histories bleed together, layered like sediment, where your steps etch alongside others, even if you never meet. And so, the paradox grows. You are drawing the terrain, but the terrain is also drawing you. You come upon a field of erased roads, lines half-formed, destinations forgotten. You kneel to examine one and feel a tug in your chest, a memory you once suppressed, a dream deferred, a possibility you walked away from before it ever had the chance to become. The path was started, but abandoned. Now it lies dormant, waiting for a second thought. You realize every omission is recorded here, not to shame, not to haunt, but to remind, to preserve the shape of what could have been. The map does not forget. It simply waits for the return of curiosity. Further on, you arrive at a landmark, a spire made entirely of questions. Its surface shifts with language. What are you seeking? Whose footsteps are you following? What part of the world do you carry that no one else can map? You touch the spire and feel yourself dissolve briefly, your outline softening, your identity becoming porous. You sense echoes of all the versions of yourself who asked the same questions and walked different routes. Their thoughts pulse through you like static. The spire holds no answers. It simply reflects the contour of your seeking. From its summit, the map sprawls in all directions, but only partially visible, like glimpsing the nervous system of possibility. The land is incomplete, not because it is broken, but because it is alive, becoming. Constantly, you descend the spire with a renewed understanding. This map is not meant to be finished. To complete it would be to stop asking, to settle. And this is a map drawn by wonder, by deviation, by hesitation, by the courage to not know. Later, you stumble upon an old structure, an observatory, buried in fog. Inside, a machine hums softly. At its center, a globe that shifts shape based on your questions. You ask it where you are. The globe becomes an ink blot. You ask it where you've been. It becomes a spiral. You ask it where you're going. It vanishes entirely. And then it speaks, without voice, but with certainty. The map is not the territory. You nod, remembering the ancient aphorism. But here, it feels different. Here, it means something literal. The map you draw is not a representation. It is the medium. The world is not beneath your feet. It is within your attention. The moment you forget something, the ground erodes. The moment you forgive, a bridge forms. The moment you speak truth, a lighthouse appears, visible even from the paths you haven't yet walked. You sit in the observatory a while, letting this settle. You realize you are not lost. You never were. Because lostness requires a fixed map, and this one moves with you. There is no destination waiting on a final page. There is only this step, then the next, each one writing itself into terrain. Eventually, you rise and exit the observatory. The world outside is different, not because it changed, but because now you can see it. Paths you once missed shimmer faintly in your peripheral vision. Old mistakes now look like necessary detours. Unanswered questions hang like lanterns, lighting routes you never dared consider. You walk, not toward somewhere, but with awareness. Behind you, the map keeps drawing. Ahead of you, the terrain waits for ink, and within you, a compass you didn't know you had. Whispers its quiet direction. Keep wondering. There is a room you only enter by accident. It hides behind metaphor, behind hesitation. You don't find it by walking, you find it by doubting. A flicker of indecision, a moment of simultaneous belief and disbelief, and suddenly you're here, inside a chamber without time, inside a paradox still waiting for resolution. In the center, a box. You already know the story. The thought experiment, the cat sealed in a box with a quantum trigger, a scenario balanced delicately between life and death, between presence and absence. Until someone opens the lid, the cat exists in both states, not dead, not alive, both, neither. But this time, something's different. Because the box doesn't hold a cat, it holds you. Not your body, but your possibility. The version of you that exists only when observed. The you that flickers between identities. The one defined not by decisions, but by uncertainty. You stand outside the box and see your own name written in the language of equations, scratched into the lid with trembling chalk. A sequence that bends grammar and physics until it becomes intention. Schrödinger named you, not because he knew who you were, but because the universe didn't. You kneel by the box. You hesitate. You feel it hum with potential. Every scenario you've ever considered but never chosen ripples through it. Every fork in your path that left an echo. Every moment you stood in front of a door, and didn't open it. They all live here, inside the box, nested like mirrors, each reflecting a self you almost became. You want to lift the lid, but you also don't, because the moment you look, the wave collapses, ambiguity dies, the unknown becomes fixed. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why the box was made. Not to trap, but to preserve, to give your unmade selves a place to breathe before they become history. You sit beside the box and listen. Inside, whispers, laughter, apologies, silence, a baby crying, a song you haven't written yet, a lie you told once that changed someone's life, a truth you never told because you didn't know how. The box is not just a container, it's a chorus, a choir of yous harmonizing in contradiction. Some whisper, "Let me out." Others plead, "Leave me be." A few say nothing at all, just breathe faintly, proof of half-existence. You think of how often you've lived this way, not as someone defined, but as someone suspended, waiting for proof, waiting for permission to be one thing, to stop being all the others. But existence doesn't wait. It pulses endlessly. In this room, you remember what most forget. You've always been the cat. You've always been in the box. Not metaphorically, fundamentally. You exist in possibility. You are not just one person. You are a probability field, a superposition of identities waiting to be witnessed. And every interaction, every glance, every word, every moment someone sees you or doesn't, collapses that field, names you, contains you. Observation limits you, but it also saves you. You realize how often you've performed yourself for the gaze of others, how their expectations became cages, collapsing your wave function into the safest version of you. The quiet one, the clever one, the agreeable one. But you were always more than that. You were always multiple, shimmering between options, ungraspable. The box groans. You know it's time. You place your hand on the lid. It's warm, not from heat, but from being filled with you, from housing all the selves you never allowed to surface. You open it slowly. Inside, a mirror. But it does not reflect. Instead, it absorbs. It takes your gaze, digests it, then returns a flicker of something adjacent. Not who you are, not who you were, who you might be if seen differently. You reach into the box. Your hand passes through the mirror's surface like smoke. The moment you touch it, memory fractures, not violently, elegantly, like prisms catching light. You see every version of yourself flash past, versions shaped by different choices, different chance encounters, different silences kept or broken. You realize identity is not solid, it's scaffolding, temporary, contextual. You are always the result of the current equation. Observer plus environment equals self, but change any variable and the sum becomes someone new. This doesn't frighten you anymore. It frees you. You sit back and let the mirror remain open. The box no longer contains you. You no longer need it to. The experiment was never about the cat. It was about the act of seeing, about what it means to exist in a world that demands certainty, but is built on uncertainty. You rise. The room shifts, becomes transparent. A hallway of doors appears, each glowing faintly, each labeled with a question rather than a destination. You walk forward. Not because you're sure, but because now, finally, you know how to move inside the unknown. There is a shape older than language, older than sound, older than the story of time itself. You've seen it before, in the curl of a shell, the swirl of galaxies, the bloom of a sunflower, the shape of your fingerprint, a spiral, a form that never repeats, yet always remembers, a rhythm that expands without ever breaking its pattern. You don't arrive at the spiral, you awaken into it, slowly, as if remembering something that was always inside your bones. It begins with a whisper, not a voice, but a vibration, low and steady, almost mathematical. It pulses just beyond perception, like a heartbeat felt through a wall. You don't know what it's saying at first, only that it repeats in a rhythm too precise to be random. The numbers come next, not spoken, shown. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13, Fibonacci, the golden ratio. You've heard of it, maybe in school, maybe in nature documentaries, maybe in the quiet awe of watching pine cones arrange themselves with impossible grace. But here, the numbers are not knowledge. They are a path. You follow them, and the world bends around you. Each step lands on an unseen pattern. You realize you are no longer walking across space. You are moving through scale, through proportion, through the deep logic that hides behind beauty. The spiral reveals itself slowly. It is not a line, it is not a curve, it is a question. What happens if growth never stops? What happens when becoming becomes the only state of being? You begin to understand. The spiral doesn't lead to a center, it leads away from it, infinitely, always outward, always expanding, but with perfect memory of where it began. It is the shape of breath, of thought, of galaxies folding open, of consciousness unraveling itself into wider and wider awareness. You feel your body shifting in resonance with this form, not physically, but cognitively, as if your mind is slowly being rewritten in spirals. Linear thinking dissolves. Cause and effect become concentric instead of sequential. You no longer ask what comes next. You ask what echoes outward. Each moment is a spiral, each emotion, each idea. None are singular, all ripple, all refract. The whisper grows louder. You realize the numbers are not random, they are keys, ratios nested in everything, in music, in DNA, in the petals of perception. You begin to hear them in your own thoughts, ideas unfolding in golden symmetry, decisions bending in recursive harmony. Your memories rearrange themselves into a pattern too elegant to be coincidence, and with it a truth unfolds. You have never thought alone. The spiral is not yours. It is shared, a blueprint embedded in reality itself. The dream of structure, the will of becoming. You recall the spirals you've ignored, the thoughts you've suppressed because they didn't fit straight lines, the questions you abandoned because they curved too wide, took too long to resolve. But now you see that resolution was never the goal. Continuity was. There's no center here, and therefore no edge. Just a pulse, expanding, evolving. You reach what feels like the edge of your perception. The spiral has grown massive, all-encompassing. You no longer walk alongside it. You are it, a being made of proportion, of recurrence, of gentle recursion. Every part of you mirrors another, smaller part. Your mind mirrors your breath. Your breath mirrors the galaxies. You see how your thoughts align with tidal rhythms, how your choices echo astronomical rotations. A realization strikes. Growth is never symmetrical. It is always spiraled. Forward motion always curves. Nothing proceeds in straight lines. Not evolution, not time, not healing, not thought. Progress doesn't point, it coils. You think of all the times you tried to force yourself to be linear. The plans, the deadlines, the self-imposed need to move from point A to point B. Now you see how unnatural it was. The spiral doesn't rush, it unfolds, and in doing so it honors every iteration. You stop moving, and yet the spiral continues. You are still, but the pattern grows around you. A new sequence begins, numbers you don't recognize, fractal echoes forming novel geometries. You've stepped beyond Fibonacci, beyond golden spirals, into the mathematics of emergence. The whisper becomes a voice. It says only one thing. You are part of the equation. You try to speak back. But language fails. Words move in lines. This voice curves. It loops. It speaks and returns. You close your eyes and let the spiral speak through you. Not in sentences, but in understanding. It shows you your own mind. How even your mistakes spiral back into insight. How pain returns with new perspective. How joy circles back with greater depth. It shows you how everything that seems lost is merely orbiting further out, waiting for you to spiral wide enough to meet it again. You cry and the tears fall in arcs. You laugh and the sound bends around itself. You are not ascending, you are unfurling. At last, the spiral begins to fade, not because it ends, but because it's now inside you. The geometry has taken root. The whisper returns to a hum. The numbers quiet themselves, satisfied. You are left standing in an ordinary space. A field, a street, a room. It's unclear. The spiral has receded. But you remember. You will always remember. The world continues in circles. You walk differently now. Not toward, not away, but with and around. Because now you know every return is a revelation. Every curve contains the next question. And the spiral never ends. You don't notice it at first. It doesn't move like a shadow should. It doesn't follow your body or obey the laws of light. There is no sun behind you, no lamp above. And yet there it is, stretching along the floor, trailing your steps with quiet precision, a stain of self that does not align with your form. This is not the shadow of your body. This is the shadow of your mind. You pause. It pauses, but only briefly. It lingers slightly longer than you do, as if considering your movement before mirroring it. It seems to breathe, but not in rhythm with your lungs. It exists not in space, but in implication. You walk forward and it grows darker, heavier. The room seems to tilt slightly under its weight. You begin to realize that the mind, this intangible web of memory, judgment, identity, casts its own kind of shade. Not because it is dark, but because it blocks light from parts of yourself you're not ready to see. The room you are in is featureless, blank, a gallery of white walls and flat air. But your shadow gives it shape. With every step it changes, sometimes wide, sometimes thin, sometimes tall, sometimes broken into fragments like glass. It slips ahead of you, leading, then slips behind, hiding. And sometimes it folds into you so tightly you forget it's there. But it never leaves, not even when you close your eyes. The mind thinks in definitions, in filters, in frames. It simplifies in order to function. It draws borders around sensation, shapes experience into categories, makes the infinite comprehensible. But in doing so, it leaves things out. Details too complex, emotions too ambiguous, realities too destabilizing. These exclusions don't disappear. They don't resolve. They collect. Layer by layer, they form shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unseen, unprocessed, the leftovers of attention, the unloved, the unexplored, the misunderstood. It's everything you pretended wasn't part of you. Until now, you walk deeper into the room. With each step, the shadow grows more articulate. It begins to move independently, not against you, but beside you. You realize it is not one shape, but many, an entire gallery of forgotten selves overlaid. The shadow has depth. You see the outline of anger you never expressed, the echo of grief you didn't grieve, the posture of a dream you gave up on too early, the flicker of joy you suppressed for fear it wouldn't last. These fragments ripple through the shadow like weather. It shifts, it twitches, it becomes a mirror you didn't ask for. You want to look away. You don't. Instead, you ask it a question. What do you want? And for the first time, the shadow speaks. Not aloud, but through sensation. You feel weight in your chest, tightness behind your eyes, a pulling at your ribs like a thread being unraveled. The answer comes not in words, but in knowing. It wants to be seen, not analyzed, not fixed, just witnessed. You step closer to a part of the shadow that looks particularly dense, an event you haven't thought about in years. The memory flashes uninvited, the time you lied to be loved, the silence you kept to stay safe. The mask you wore so convincingly you forgot it was a disguise. You feel shame. The mind flinches, tries to justify, but the shadow doesn't accuse. It doesn't want punishment, only integration. You exhale, slowly, and in that breath something shifts. The shadow flickers, softens, not because it's leaving, but because it no longer needs to hide. You realize the shadow is only dark because it has never stood in your full attention. You sit on the floor. The room grows quieter. The edges of your thoughts blur. And for the first time, you let the shadow wrap around you, not to consume you, but to remind you of everything you are, the pieces you denied, the memories you disowned, the truths you weren't ready to speak. There is no part of you that is inherently unworthy, only parts you've forgotten how to hold. The shadow hums now, a low frequency, steady, familiar, like a song your childhood used to know. You feel it sinking with your pulse, no longer chasing you, no longer haunting you, just being, present. It shows you visions, not as hallucinations but as clarity. You see your life rethreaded through the lens of compassion. All the contradictions, all the distortions, they no longer cancel each other out. They layer, they weave, they form the complexity of you. You begin to speak aloud, not to anyone, but to the room, to the shadow, to yourself. I remember the time I tried to be someone else to survive. I remember pretending I wasn't hurt because it was easier than asking for care. I remember forgetting who I was just to belong. And with each confession, the shadow nods. Not with approval, with understanding. It softens further, becomes less distinct. Not because it's shrinking, but because it's becoming part of the room, part of you. Integrated, returned. You rise slowly. The floor feels different underfoot. The walls no longer echo. The shadow is still there, but now it walks beside you, no longer trailing, no longer looming, just present, quiet, loyal. You understand now. The mind creates shadow not because it is cruel, but because it must prioritize. But you are not the mind. You are the one who can choose to turn around and look. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your proof. Proof that you have felt deeply, that you have risked, that you have tried, that you are alive. You step forward. And for the first time, the shadow follows, not out of necessity, but trust. You've always believed dreams were yours, born from your own desires, shaped by your own mind, dancing freely through your unconscious. But tonight you see the strings, not tied to your limbs but to your thoughts, not from above but from below. The dream begins with movement. You take a step and something tugs, a second step and the air thickens, subtly resisting, not to stop you but to remind you you're not moving alone. This dream is staged. The set is perfect, an endless stage stretching beyond the horizon, draped in velvet night, spotlights flickering into constellations. The floor groans underfoot like memory waking up, and above, the sky is filled with lines, silken, invisible unless you squint. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. They reach down from nowhere, vanish into the crown of your head, your hands, your spine. At first you assume they're metaphorical. Then you move again, and the strings tighten. You pause. The dream does not. Props slide into view. Scenery rearranges itself. A table set for one appears, candles flickering with uncertain flames. A script rests on the table, but the pages are blank. You're not given lines, you're given cues. And suddenly you realize the dream isn't being imagined, it's being performed. Not by you, but through you. You're the marionette. You try to resist. You step off the marks, turn away from the spotlight. The strings pull tighter, not painfully, but insistently. You feel your head turn, your mouth move. You speak, but the words aren't yours. You laugh, but the emotion lags behind. Your body acts out a scene you don't remember agreeing to. And in the audience, silhouettes watching, unmoving, unknowable. You can't see their faces. You only feel their expectations. Then comes the question, who is writing this dream? A voice answers from nowhere, not a whisper, not a god, just a tone. A presence that says, you are not the only author of your life. That presence shows you images, family, culture, memory, fear, media, repetition, every idea you inherited, every thought you mistook as your own, every should and shouldn't, every rule stitched into you before you even knew what questions to ask. You start to see how deep the strings run, into your ambitions, your relationships, your quiet shames. Even your fantasies have fingerprints on them. Parents, teachers, lovers, society. They weren't malicious, just loud. You grew beneath them like vines trained along a trellis, believing the shape you took was your own. Now in this dream, the illusion is broken. You see yourself as you've never seen before, not as an actor, not as a director, but as both and neither, caught between the freedom of intention and the inheritance of influence. You step backstage. Behind the curtains, mirrors, rows of them, each showing a different version of you. One smiles too wide, another slouches with exhaustion, one wears clothes you've never seen but feels oddly familiar. Each version plays a role you abandoned or suppressed. the people you've been, are being, or might still become, each one dangling with their own threads. Some strings are bright, aloft, memories of joy, connection, curiosity. Others are knotted, tangled, guilt, shame, self-protection, mistaken for a self-definition. You run your hand through the air and feel them twist around your fingers. They're not heavy. They're woven from belief, from repetition, from forgetting. And yet you begin to understand. These strings aren't traps. They're records. Each one is a history. And once seen, they can be rewoven. You sit. The dream slows. Time becomes thick. You pick up the nearest string, tied to the moment you learned silence was safer than truth. It thrums with memory. You don't cut it. You trace it. Back through time, back to the person who handed it to you, with trembling hands, believing it was a gift. You see their face. You forgive. The string softens, fades. Another takes its place. Not one of silence, but of understanding. You begin to rethread the dream, not to control it, not to erase the influence, but to participate. Actively, consciously, you keep some strings, the ones tied to wonder, to awe, to love. Others you release, the ones that stifled, narrowed, told you who you must be instead of asking who you might become. The audience remains, still watching. But now you approach the edge of the stage and bow, not out of submission, but reclamation. You are no longer just a puppet. You are the puppeteer too. The script is unwritten, the cue's yours to choose. You speak your first true line, not scripted, not expected, not inherited. And the dream shifts. The strings do not vanish. They transform into threads of light, connection, awareness. They stretch not from above but outward to others. Dreamers like you, rewriting their roles, and together you begin a new scene, not of control, but of creation. The curtains open wider than ever before. The stage dissolves into endless possibility. And finally, you wake, still holding the thread of your own becoming. Before the word, before the voice, before even the first vibration etched itself across the skin of time, there was silence, not the absence of sound, but a presence so complete it could only be felt in stillness. It wasn't empty, it wasn't waiting, it simply was. And in some distant corner of your awareness, so distant it almost feels like a memory, you remember that silence. You remember it not with your ears, but with something deeper, a knowing that predates thought, a resonance that hums in the spaces between breaths. You arrive in a place without walls, a space so vast it seems not to contain you, but to be you. You try to speak, but nothing happens, not because you've lost your voice, but because there is no sound here. Your intention reaches outward, but it returns undecoded. Words here are irrelevant. Language has no gravity. You take a step, though there is no ground, and the silence moves with you. It wraps around your body like water. You realize, in this place, your movement is your expression. You shift slightly, and the silence changes tone. You inhale, and it deepens. You think of a question, and the silence ripples. This silence does not oppose sound, it contains it. Sound is merely what happens when silence becomes curious. You remember how often you feared silence, filled it with chatter, distraction, music, noise, not because silence was empty, but because it mirrored you too well, because in silence you are fully met. There's nowhere to hide, no narrative to lean on, no tone to interpret, just the raw presence of self, unbuffered. You begin to see echoes of this silence in your own life. The silence after someone says, "I love you," and you don't know what to say back. The silence when you realize a moment is ending. The silence between breaths when you're about to cry but don't. The silence after goodbye. The silence when you're alone but not lonely. You've mistaken these silences for voids, but they were thresholds. In this place they gather. They take shape. You see a structure begin to form in the stillness, a geometry made of pauses, of hesitations, of withheld words. It spirals upward, built entirely from unsaid things. Every brick is a moment you didn't speak, every beam a thought you left incomplete. The structure isn't mournful, it's sacred. It holds the weight of what could not yet be voiced. And now the silence invites you to walk through it. Each step echoes with a memory. You pass a corridor where the silence vibrates like grief, low, aching, unresolved. You remember the funeral where you couldn't cry, the hug that lasted longer than it should have, the phone call you never made. The silence here doesn't accuse. It holds. It gives space. Another room pulses with awe. The silence of watching snowfall in the early morning, the hush of a forest where every tree is listening, the reverent stillness before a child is born. These are not silences of absence. They are silences of presence too complete to be reduced to sound. You feel tears rise, not from sadness but from recognition. You've known this language all along. It was the first you ever spoke. Before you formed words, you knew how to sit beside someone without explanation. Before you learned to explain yourself, you knew how to feel without filtering. Before language taught you what things were, silence showed you what they meant. You think of how often you've interrupted this language, how quick you've been to label the unspeakable, to translate wonder into facts, to cage beauty in sentences. But now, in this place, the silence reclaims its authority. You sit, you do not speak, and the silence speaks back. Not in answers, but in expansion. It shows you the spaces in your life you've overlooked. The moments that seemed small, but held entire universes. The glance from a stranger that shifted something in you. The quiet agreement between you and someone you loved but never confessed. The comfort of sitting beside someone while both of you said nothing, yet understood everything. You begin to understand. Sound is a translation. Silence is the original. And sometimes the most truthful thing you can do is not speak. You recall how often silence has been misunderstood, feared, weaponized, avoided. But here you see its true form. It is the root, not the absence, the fertile void, the canvas before the brush, the space where intention forms before it becomes action. You realize you are not here to break the silence. You are here to listen to it. And as you listen, something begins to shift in you. A softening, a widening. You start to hear your own life differently. Not as a string of events, but as a symphony of pauses. The moments between the milestones, the feelings between the words, the truths you've always known but never said aloud. You see now that silence is not passive. It is the most active space there is. It listens, it receives, it invites, it waits for you to become still enough to hear what was always there. The dream begins to dissolve. But the silence remains. Even as you wake, it lingers in the space before you move, before you check your phone, before you speak your first word. That silence, that deep, ancient, patient silence, it welcomes you back. It reminds you, you do not always need to say something to mean something. You do not always need to act to be present. You do not always need to know to be wise. And perhaps the silence has always spoken first. You just weren't still enough to hear it. Until now. At first glance, there is no cage, only light, only space. You stand in a room with no ceiling, no bars, no locks. The walls are made of doors, each one open, each one inviting. Some lead to gardens, some to oceans, some to quiet corridors filled with soft, humming light. There are doors carved from memory, doors stitched from dreams, doors that open into conversations you never finished. You walk among them, fingertips brushing their frames. You could step through anyone, at any time. And yet, you do not move. You tell yourself you're exploring, that you're waiting for the right one, that you want to understand them first. But underneath that explanation is a stillness that doesn't feel like rest, a hesitation that's too familiar. You stand in a place of infinite exits, and still you stay. And slowly, quietly, you begin to understand the paradox. This is a prison made entirely of choices. This is a cage made of open doors. You sit on the floor. The air is clear, warm, nothing pushes you, nothing rushes you, and that, in itself, becomes its own kind of weight. You are surrounded by possibility, not threat, not force, possibility. And it begins to press against your ribs like gravity turned inward. The more doors that appear, the heavier you feel. Each choice becomes not freedom, but a burden. A question you haven't answered. A version of you haven't become. You try to count the doors. You can't. Some vanish, some multiply. Some lead to smaller rooms with more doors. Some led back to this same space, looped in spatial recursion. A few pulse softly when you look at them, as if remembering you. One shows the shadow of a child drawing spirals in the dust. Another flickers with candlelight and the smell of old paper. One door is covered in fogged glass. On the other side, two people embrace, blurred by time. The image aches. You know what some doors are. Others you feel in your bones but can't name. The problem isn't not having options, it's having too many, because each door requires a leaving, a letting go. Each step through one means saying goodbye to the infinite that remains, and that is what keeps you still. Not fear of what lies ahead, but grief for what you'll never see if you choose. Choice has always carried this quiet violence. It is both liberation and erasure. The more awake you are to the depth of your options, the more sacred and terrifying every decision becomes. And now, in this room of unending exits, you see how the soul can trap itself with its own awareness. Freedom without direction becomes paralysis. You try to move toward a door, any door. Your hand reaches forward, but your feet root deeper. You tell yourself it's caution, it's contemplation, but the room whispers otherwise. It speaks in stillness. It says, "You've confused infinite with necessary. You've mistaken delay for deliberation. You've allowed potential to become permission for inaction." You close your eyes. You remember a time you made a decision before you knew you were allowed. You said yes before knowing the cost. You stepped forward without asking who you'd leave behind. And though it hurt, you lived. You grew. You found truths you couldn't have planned for. That part of you still exists, but it's buried under layers of logic, overthinking, and all the stories you've told yourself about not yet. You open your eyes. The doors are still open. But one, just one, is glowing softly now, not brighter, just warmer, not urgent, just familiar. It doesn't promise happiness or safety or clarity. It promises movement. It promises momentum. It whispers not with answers, but with the sound of a path unfolding. You take a breath, and another. The room doesn't change. It doesn't need to. The change is in you. You rise. You move toward the glowing door. Not because it's better, not because it's right, but because it is yours to walk through. And that is enough. As your foot crosses the threshold, you feel something lift. Not freedom from the cage, but the realization that there never was one. The bars were made of your own waiting, your own projections, the belief that choosing meant losing, that commitment meant confinement. But now you see it clearly. You were never trapped. You were circling. And the cage, it was never made of limits. It was made of all the doors you refused to close. Before light, before form, before gravity folded space into geometry, there was vibration, a ripple in the dark, the first song, the seed of structure. The universe did not begin with fire or word, but with a hum, not sound, not silence, something between, a frequency both too ancient and too intimate to be recorded. It did not call creation into being. It remembered it. And in that remembering, it said your name. Not the name you were given, not the syllables you write on forms or answer to in crowded rooms. This was the name underneath that name, the name made of pattern, of pulse, a name the universe never needed to speak aloud because you were already vibrating in time with it. Your breath, your blood, your being, resonant. You arrive not in a place, but in a tone. The dream doesn't begin with scenery. It begins with resonance, a pitch you can't hear but can feel, deep in the chest, like the memory of a song that once kept you safe. Everything here is shaped by frequency. Shapes bloom in harmonic spirals. Mountains curve like waveforms. Rivers murmur in modulation. Stars blink in rhythm. The air buzzes with attention. Not watching you, but with you. You are not the center of this world. You are a note in its chord. And as you move, you begin to sense it more clearly. You've always been vibrating, every cell, every thought, oscillating. You were never static. You were always a song in motion. You walk, and with each step the hum changes. You realize you are part of the modulation. The tone shifts to match your state. When your thoughts scatter, the resonance flickers. When you breathe deeply, it steadies. When you feel gratitude, the entire space around you brightens slightly, the pitch warming. The environment is not reacting, it's harmonizing. You approach what appears to be a stone, smooth, black, hovering inches above the ground. It pulses faintly. You reach out and touch it. A low chord floods your body, not heard but known. And in that instant, you feel every moment in your life where something pulled you forward, without logic, without proof, just rightness, as if something remembered you before you arrived. This stone hums your name, not as a sound, but as a signature. You realize that everything you've done, every decision, every detour, was part of a larger melody. And you were not lost. You were just on a long crescendo, The landscape opens. You see others, not people, but frequencies, some strong, clear, vibrant, others dim, barely audible, and some that feel like echoes, fragments of songs cut short. You feel a pang. These are the forgotten selves, the silenced songs, lives that were unlived, choices that were never given space to resonate. And yet even they hum. The universe does not discard anything. It holds all frequencies, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. You begin to hum, not with your mouth, but with your presence, and slowly a shape forms in the air around you, a spiral made of shimmering light coalescing into a figure. It mirrors you, a reflection not of appearance, but of essence. It is you, rendered in vibration. It speaks, but not in words. In overtones, it asks, "Do you remember your original frequency?" You hesitate. You want to say yes. You want to claim you remember being whole, being known, being in tune. But the truth is harder. You've spent so long tuning yourself to survive, to be heard, to fit. You've mimicked others' melodies. You've played roles. You've learned when to quiet your dissonance, when to mute your longing. The figure hums softly. That was necessary, but it was not you. And with that it dissolves into 1,000 small tones, each circling your body, reweaving the sonic fabric you didn't know you were wearing. A symphony of reintegration. You feel it in your bones, the slow retuning of your being. Not to someone else's scale, but to your own original resonance. A memory arises, not visual, not narrative, just feeling. The first time you felt completely understood, not for what you said or what you did, but for simply being. That was the echo. That was the hum. You ask, has the universe always known me? The space around you vibrates in affirmation, not as destiny, not as control, but as recognition. Your existence is not random, not meaningless. You are not a note dropped into chaos. You are a tone that completes a chord. You do not create harmony. You are harmony in motion. And now you begin to hear it in everything. The wind hums your name in fragments. The trees vibrate slightly as you pass. Even silence has tone. You begin to walk differently, less like you're moving through space, more like you're playing through time. Each step, a beat, each thought, a pitch. You are improvising, composing, remembering. You see now that life was never about finding your voice. It was about remembering your tone and letting yourself resonate. You pause at the edge of the space. The hum is soft now, but complete. It holds you, not as a sound, but as home. You realize you never left it. You were just surrounded by other frequencies so loud, so persistent, they made you forget your own. But now you know it again. Not because you heard it, but because you are it. The universe hummed your name first, and it never stopped. Even when you did, it hums still, waiting for you to hum back. It begins with a thread, thin, quiet, almost nothing. A single thought, flickering in your mind like static before a signal. You barely notice it, a passing idea unformed, but as it lingers it curls. Not forward, not backward, but inward, folding around itself like smoke caught in gravity. The dreamscape around you is dark, but not empty. Lines of thought float in the air, light thin, hair fine, silver against the void. You reach for one, and it recoils slightly, then loops around your hand. It feels alive or aware, not because it thinks, but because it is thinking. You are inside the architecture of thought itself, and it is drawing. Thoughts don't stay still here. They weave. Some twist gently, like threads braided in moonlight. Others are knotted so tightly they pulse with tension, vibrating with anxious rhythm. Some form shapes that move, Mobius bands of uncertainty, spirals of regret, lattices of memory. You don't walk through this world. You float, pulled by the density of questions you've never answered. You come across a suspended orb, woven entirely from looping thoughts. You recognize it. It's yours. A worry you carried for years. Revisited daily, rehearsed and rewritten. You touch it and the strands react. They show you every time you fed the shape. Every night you stared at the ceiling, tangling yourself further. Every morning you carried its weight again, polished it, justified it. But now you see what you couldn't see before. The shape has no center, only loops. It feeds on itself. You let go. The thought, no longer held, begins to unravel, not disappear, just loosen. It drifts upward, threads detaching like fog. The space it occupied doesn't collapse. It breathes. You drift further. The tangle around you becomes denser. Whole structures appear, cathedrals made of logic, towers built from plans, mazes of what-ifs and almosts. Some thoughts move like insects, darting, panicked, aimless. Others move with grace, expanding like galaxies, curious, open-ended. Some thoughts are questions that grew so wide they became spaces you could walk inside. Others are beliefs that hardened into walls. You reach a chamber filled with frozen thoughts, encased in crystal. Old ideas you never questioned. You peer into one, the belief that success must look a certain way. You remember building it slowly, from expectation, repetition, approval. You try to crack it, but it resists, until you ask it a question. What if this was never mine? The crystal fractures. Thoughts respond not to force, but to inquiry. They don't want answers. They want motion. Questions untangle them. You pass through a garden of thoughts left unfinished, half-grown, delicate, shimmering. A story you almost wrote, a decision you never made, a relationship you walked away from too early. These thoughts are tender. They do not accuse. They wait. They are not dead. Just paused. You reach a mirror. It does not reflect your body. It reflects your mind. Not thoughts themselves, but their shapes. Your reflection is not a face, but a constellation of interconnected patterns. You see how one assumption loops into another, how one doubt birthed a dozen others, how one childhood phrase calcified into a belief you've never outgrown. You see your obsessions, your rituals, your reflexes, and among them, spaces, gaps, the untangled, the forgotten, the open. These are the places where new shapes can form. You feel a strange sensation. Forgiveness, not directed outward, inward. Forgiveness for the mind's knots, its stutters, its loops, for the ways you've confused thinking with knowing, for how you've punished yourself for not figuring it out. You understand now that thought is not a tool you hold. It's a landscape you inhabit, and you are not its prisoner. You are its architect. You begin to shape thought differently. You take a doubt and bend it. It becomes a doorway. You take a fear and soften its edge. It becomes a question. You take an old belief, one that always felt too tight, and you stretch it until it breathes. It becomes a path. The dream shifts. The shapes around you pulse with rhythm. Thought is now motion flow. Geometry uncoiled. The tangles unravel into art. The noise becomes structure. You are dancing through cognition, reweaving yourself with every step. You realize thinking was never about solving, it was about sculpting. And you now are learning to shape without strangling. You sit in the center of the thought world, not to stop, but to feel. Thought moves around you, curious, not as chatter, as presence. It wraps you gently, like silk, like story. You close your eyes. You see not words, not ideas, just motion, connection, light. You understand, finally, thoughts don't define you. They design you. And you are allowed to redraw. You've flipped the coin 1,000 times, not literally, not with fingers and metal, but in your mind, in your decisions, in every moment where you faced a choice and told yourself, it's either this or that. Stay or go, speak or stay silent, begin or wait. You told yourself life was binary, that meaning lived in the outcomes, that a coin had to land. But now, in this dream, the coin refuses. You stand in a quiet room, round, dimly lit. A single coin rests on a pedestal. It shines faintly, too dull to be precious, too familiar to be sacred. And yet you hesitate before touching it. You know this isn't an ordinary object. It's heavier than it looks. Not in mass, in implication. You pick it up and it's warm. Not from heat, from memory. You toss it. It does not fall. It spins. Mid-air, slow at first, then faster. It rotates between light and shadow. Heads, tails, choice, the consequence. The dream hums in resonance. The coin doesn't slow. It doesn't obey gravity. It refuses resolution. You begin to understand. This coin is not about luck. It's not about decision. It's about paradox. And it will never land. Because both sides are true. The room around you shifts. The walls dissolve into landscape. You walk through a forest that splits with every step, branches of paths unfolding left and right and left, over and over. You try to pick one. The forest curves, loops, doubles back. Eventually you realize you're walking all paths at once. They tangle beneath your feet like roots. You are not choosing between them. You are them. The coin hovers beside you now, spinning. A companion, a mirror. You see all the times you chose one path and mourned the other. All the decisions you made and second-guessed. All the doors you closed and kept peeking under. You thought you left things behind. You didn't. They followed you. Not as regret, but as echoes, possibilities you didn't destroy, just deferred. There is no clean cut between what happened and what might have. They overlap. Your life is made not only of what you did, but what you almost did. Those moments shaped you too. The coin spins faster. You ask, how can both things be true? The dream responds not with voice, but with clarity. It shows you a memory, an old argument, one you've told yourself you won. And yet, in this dream, you see it from the other side. You hear their fear, their need. It doesn't cancel yours. It deepens it. You see how your truth and theirs existed simultaneously. Not opposing, entwined. Another memory surfaces, a choice you made in fear. You told yourself it was necessary. You still believe that. But now you also see who you might have been if you had chosen differently. That version of you still exists in the folds of your mind, though quiet, half-formed but present. You begin to feel it in your body. the pull of contradiction, the weight of duality. Not conflict, but complexity. The coin hovers in front of your face. You stare into it and it expands, becomes a portal, becomes a lens. You see your life refracted, every moment containing its inverse, every certainty paired with a doubt, every joy braided with grief. You realize the coin was never meant to land. It was meant to spin, to remind you that truth is not a line, it's a circle, it's motion, a dance between perspectives, a rhythm between belief and uncertainty. You sit, you breathe, you stop trying to resolve, you let the paradox rest inside you. Two truths, two feelings, two futures, both real, both incomplete. And suddenly there's peace, not the peace of answers, the peace of permission, to be many things at once, to want and not want, to know and not know, to believe and still question, to love and still leave, to stay and still imagine going. The coin slows just slightly. You don't catch it. You let it spin. Because now you understand. Balance isn't about choosing sides. It's about holding them. Both. Always, gently. You never saw it before. But now, as the coin slows, it tilts, revealing a sliver of metal between the faces. The edge. A narrow plane where heads and tails blur into one. It's not meant to be landed on. It's meant to be known, to be held in awareness, that decisions are never pure, that outcomes are not final, that identity doesn't resolve into a single answer. The edge is where the truest self lives, not in choosing, but in witnessing the choice, in knowing that even when you commit, a part of you remains unchosen, and that part still breathes. You smile. It's a quiet smile. Not of conclusion, but of recognition. You don't need the coin to land. You don't need to know what could have been better. You only need to walk with all of it. The clarity and the confusion, the path and its echo. The coin spins a while longer. Then it dissolves into light. And when you wake, you carry not a decision, but a presence, a sense that you are not this or that. You are the space that can hold both. And that is enough. There's a gaze you've felt your entire life, not from above, not from others, not even from within. Something older than introspection, deeper than surveillance. A presence not content to merely observe what you do, but to watch the act of watching itself. The dream begins in a chamber of mirrors, not ordinary ones. These don't reflect your face. They reflect your attention. Wherever your gaze lands, the mirrors shift, not showing what you see, but how you see it. At first, you test them. You look at the floor. The mirror dims, fogging with distraction. You focus on your breath. The mirror sharpens, revealing your pulse in light. You think of someone you've lost. The glass melts into a sea of memory. You think of nothing, and the mirror waits, unchanging, quietly asking, who is it that's thinking nothing? This place isn't showing you yourself. It's showing you the self that notices yourself. You walk forward. The mirrors line a spiral hallway, each one tuned to a layer of perception. The shallow reflections come first, your posture, your expressions, your reactions. Then come the subtler mirrors, your assumptions, your tendencies, the way your thoughts edit reality in real time. One mirror glints with every lie you've told yourself to feel whole. Another hums with the residue of every moment you've performed a version of you for someone else's comfort. And then a silence, a mirror with nothing in it. You stand before it for a long time. It doesn't fog, it doesn't move. It reflects nothing, not even the space around it. And slowly you realize this mirror is watching you back. It doesn't care about what you're seeing. It's interested in the one doing the seeing, the watcher, the witness. And in that moment, you feel something behind your perception, not a god, not a force, just awareness, infinite, impersonal, present. It does not judge, it does not intervene, it simply sees. And as you meet its gaze, something in you begins to unravel. Because all this time, you thought awareness was yours, your tool, your gift. But now you see, you are not the one who watches. You are the watched. You sit in front of the blank mirror. You stop trying to see. You simply let yourself be seen. The feeling is strange, unsettling at first, like being read by something that does not need your words. But slowly, the discomfort softens. The awareness does not poke, it holds. You feel known without explanation, seen without performance. And then it happens. Your awareness begins to fold in on itself. You see that you are not just experiencing this dream, you are observing yourself experiencing it, and then observing that observation, and so on. Layers of self peel back like petals, each one watching the one before it, each one more silent, more spacious, until nothing remains but the gaze. No identity, no opinion, just witnessing. It's dizzying at first, then liberating, because now, without trying, you understand. You are not the story. You are the screen. You are not the thought. You are the space it echoes in. You are not even the dreamer. You are the I the dreamer forgot they were dreaming through. The chamber opens, and you step into a vast plain of stillness. Here, there are no mirrors. Because nothing needs to be reflected, everything just is. You feel sensations rise in you, memories, emotions, ideas. You watch them come. You watch them go. You no longer identify with them. You no longer resist them. You no longer say, "This is me." You say, "This is happening within me." And for the first time, truly, you feel free. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you've seen the part of you that needs no answers, the part that is already whole, already still, already watching. The eye that watches the watcher does not blink, because it is not a part of you. It is the field in which you unfold. And as you return to waking, you do not close your eyes. You carry the gaze with you, that soft, eternal attention, not as a voice, not as a guide, but as the gentle reminder that everything happening in your life is being seen by something that does not need you to be anything other than what you already are. And now, finally, so do you. You begin to move again, slowly, without urgency, without expectation. Each step no longer feels like an act of will, but an unfolding, like the petal of a flower doesn't choose to open, it simply follows the light. And you realize, it's not that you have become the observer, it's that you've remembered you always were. Beneath every thought, behind every emotion, beyond every role you've ever played, there has been something watching, quietly, constantly, without attachment. You think back to your life, before the dream, before the silence. You see yourself brushing your teeth, checking your phone, rushing through errands. All so fast, so noisy. But even then, the watcher was there, watching you worry, watching you pretend, watching you strive and judge and hope and spiral and love. You thought you were alone in those moments. You weren't. You were simply distracted from the one presence that never left. The Watcher asks for nothing. It doesn't want you to perform. It doesn't require peace or focus or joy. It only asks that you notice it noticing. And in doing so, the noise lessens, not because it disappears, but because it no longer owns you. You see a memory drift past, one you hadn't thought of in years, a moment you said something cruel, something careless. You feel the guilt rise, reflexively, but this time you don't grasp it. You observe it. You watch how the guilt wants to take center stage, how it wants to write the script of your worth. But it can't, not under this gaze. The Watcher doesn't flinch, doesn't agree or argue, it just sees, and somehow, being seen without judgment dissolves the shame. Another memory surfaces, one of joy, pure and unfiltered. You relive it briefly, then let it pass. The Watcher is not greedy. It doesn't cling to bliss any more than it clings to pain. It simply receives. You begin to understand how much of your life has been shaped by the fear of being seen the wrong way, the need to control the gaze of others, to curate, to hide, to exaggerate. But now that fear softens, because you've met the gaze that can never be turned against you, the one that sees the storm and the stillness and loves both equally, the one that doesn't love from preference, but from presence. The plain stretches endlessly before you, and for the first time, the horizon isn't something to chase, it's something to trust. You walk, not to arrive, but to participate. You are no longer trying to become. You are letting yourself become aware of what already is, and you see it in everything now. The Watcher isn't only within, it's everywhere. It's in the way trees remain still even when no one's looking. It's in the space between two people when no one is speaking. It's in the dog sleeping on a sunlit floor. In the pause before a kiss. In the quiet at the end of a song. In the hush between a baby's breath and their first word. It's not surveillance. It's sacred attention. It's the silence that listens because it is made of listening. You understand now that to live from this place is not to escape your life. It's to be fully in it. Not to avoid your roles, your patterns, your emotions, but to witness them with such clarity that they soften their grip. You still get angry, still make mistakes, still get lost. But now you do it in the light. And eventually the dream begins to fold itself. The plane of stillness fades into soft gray. The mirrors vanish. The Watcher remains. But not as a dream feature, as you. You return to waking. The ceiling looks the same. The air feels ordinary. But something is different. There is space now. Space between stimulus and response, space between emotion and meaning, space between thought and identity. And in that space, the Watcher sits quietly, not above you, not beyond you, but as you. And as you rise to meet the day, whatever its shape, whatever its rhythm, you do not seek to control it. You meet it with the gaze that sees everything and holds nothing. It begins with a sense of motion, but no origin. You're already climbing, though you don't recall starting. Your hands grasp rungs of soft light, each step upward a pulse. Below you, nothing, no ground, no past, only a memory of descent that may never have happened. Above you, more rungs, vanishing into darkness. The ladder doesn't rest against anything. It hangs in space, suspended from absence, anchored in uncertainty. You ask yourself, where does this ladder lead? And immediately the ladder answers, by continuing. Each rung you climb hums faintly, a chord struck by your touch. You begin to feel the intervals between them, as if the climb is musical, as if progress creates melody. It's not a rhythm you control, it's a rhythm that carries you. You look down again, there's still nothing. The higher you climb, the more sure you are that there never was anything below. No beginning, just awareness of ascent. You climb through clouds of thought, soft, weightless, murmuring. They brush past your face, each one carrying an old belief. Some whisper, "You'll never get there." Others say, "You've already arrived." You let them pass. You stop clutching at conclusions. You stop naming the climb. There is no destination here, only continuation. The ladder twists, not dramatically, just slightly, a turn, a curve. You realize it's not vertical. It's spiraling gently, like DNA unfolding, like a staircase dreamed by geometry. And the movement isn't linear. Time here does not unfold rung by rung. Instead, it folds back onto itself. Some steps feel familiar, others feel like foreshadowing. You climb past echoes, past memories that haven't happened yet. You see other ladders suspended nearby, others climbing. Not above or below you, beside. Their ladders hum with different frequencies, some flicker with laughter, others resonate with grief. A few vanish suddenly into light or silence. No ladder is the same. No direction is wrong. You realize the climb is not towards something. It's through something. Through stages of awareness, through thresholds of belief, through layers of forgetting. A rung cracks beneath you, just slightly. You don't fall, but you freeze. The instinct is to descend, to return to certainty. But there is no return. You know this now. Downward is an illusion. The ladder only moves in one direction, forward into becoming. So you wait, you breathe, you trust, and the cracked rung holds. You ascend again. Then a shift. The rungs begin to change texture. They become questions. Literal, luminous questions. You grasp, who am I without what I've achieved? Step, what if I am not behind or ahead, but exactly where I need to be? Step, what part of me have I left behind in order to feel acceptable? Step, you realize the ladder is teaching you, not through instruction, but through asking. It is made of inquiry, of wondering. Each question holds your weight more than any certainty ever could. You climb higher. There are moments of fear, doubt, even awe. But the ladder never shakes, because the ladder doesn't hold you. You hold yourself by choosing to climb. And then you reach a point you didn't know existed, a rung that doesn't lead to another. There is no next step. You wait. The space is quiet. Then, slowly, the ladder unhooks. It doesn't drop you. It rotates, shifts, becomes horizontal, becomes a bridge. You walk, each rung now a memory, a lesson, a life. And then, the ladder vanishes. You are suspended in yourself, with no ground, no sky, no direction, just presence. You laugh, not from amusement, but from knowing. You never needed to climb to reach anything. The ladder was not taking you upward. It was unfolding you inward. And now, rungless, rootless, weightless, you continue. Not climbing, not falling, just becoming. The first postcard arrives before the dream begins. It's tucked inside a book you never finished reading. You flip the pages absent-mindedly, and there it is, paper sun-bleached at the edges, corners curled, no stamp, no address. Just handwriting you recognize instantly as your own, though you've never written these words. It says, "Don't rush. You still haven't met the part of yourself that knows how this ends." You blink. The world softens. The dream begins. You find yourself in a city that glows like memory, familiar, but refracted. The buildings lean with time. Streetlights hum like tuning forks. You walk without aim, and the sky pulses with invisible messages. A soft static in the air buzzes with potential. You feel the presence of something just ahead of you, always turning the corner as you arrive. Not fate, not destiny. You, just a few steps further into becoming. And then you see them, postcards, everywhere, draped over windows, wedged into mailboxes, nailed to trees. They shimmer faintly, written in the future tense, always addressed to the one who was me. The messages are never long, just enough. You're going to leave, and it will hurt, but you won't be lost. There is a version of you who said no. She still writes poetry. The silence you avoid now becomes the place you return to later. Some are cryptic, some are unbearably kind. None are instructions. They are reminders from versions of you who've already passed this way. You collect them like breadcrumbs, each one rearranging your sense of time. The future is not ahead. It is beside you, whispering sideways. It is not waiting. It is watching, not to judge, but to witness. You stop walking. You sit beneath a clock tower that spins counterclockwise. The hands unwind the hours like thread, undoing every moment you once believed was permanent. A postcard flutters down beside you. It reads, "Forgive yourself for not knowing what you couldn't have known yet." You exhale, and for a moment, you feel the full weight of time collapse inward. All the versions of you, the ones who stayed, who ran, who listened, who silenced themselves, they're not behind you. They're in orbit, each one still sending signals. Time here is not a line, it's a correspondence. A long conversation between selves, between decisions, between moments still unfolding and those you thought were already over. You begin to write back, not with pen and ink, but with action. You make a choice you were once too afraid to make. You let go of something you were once too afraid to lose. You rest when rest used to feel like failure. You feel grief without trying to package it in language. Each moment echoes forward. You imagine a future version of yourself receiving this moment like a letter. You whisper, "I hope this finds you well," and you feel the whisper return. It did. In the final stretch of the dream, you find a postcard pinned to the sky. You reach for it. It simply says, "This was the turning point. You just didn't know it yet." You wake slowly, but the message stays. The dream fades, but you've already mailed yourself something real, and in time, you'll receive it again. There is a word buried beneath all the ones you've said, a word without language, without letters. It has never passed your lips, but it's been carried in every breath. You've reached for it in moments of awe, in the quiet ache before tears, in the pause after someone says your name with meaning. It lingers in the throat, not stuck, not silent, but waiting. It is the word beneath all others, the root, the origin, the unspoken source of meaning. The dream begins with a soundless invitation. You stand in a vast library. It breathes like a cathedral, walls of books rising endlessly into shadow. There are no shelves, only gravity-defying spirals of paper and ink. You move slowly, reverently, each step triggering a soft flutter of pages around you. The texts are blank, not because they've been erased, but because they're still listening. They do not contain words. They are waiting for yours. You've come here searching, not for knowledge, not for history, but for a single word. The one that has lived in you for as long as you've known how to name things. You don't know what it means. You only know it's yours, and that you were never meant to find it with effort. You ascend a staircase that doesn't curve so much as remember the act of curving. The higher you climb, the quieter the dream becomes. Not empty quiet, sacred quiet, the kind that asks nothing from you except presence. You arrive at a chamber made entirely of whispers, not voices, not sounds, just impressions. The emotional residue of language before it becomes language. You stand in the center, and the whispers begin to weave themselves around you. Threads of longing, recognition, safety, wonder. They do not speak in sentences. They press against you like memory. And suddenly a phrase emerges, not aloud, not even in thought, just a pulse. You've always known the word. You've just forgotten how to let it speak you. You want to ask what the word is, but the dream answers with images instead. You are 5, alone in a sunlit room, drawing circles without knowing why. You are 10, staring at the sky, overcome by a feeling too large for your vocabulary. You are 17, writing a sentence that makes your hands tremble, though you don't know what it means. You are 29, saying goodbye with your eyes, because no goodbye in language was enough. You are now standing in this dream, realizing that all of these were the word trying to surface. It wasn't a concept. It was you, before explanation. You sit, you close your eyes, and finally you stop trying to name the word. Instead, you listen to the shape it's taken in your life. You feel the times it ached in your chest when you couldn't express what you felt. You feel the times it softened your anger before you spoke. You feel the times it stood quietly between you and another person, understood but unspoken. It's not a noun, it's not a verb, it's a vibration, the sound of the soul turning toward itself. The dream shifts. You find yourself in a chamber made of mirrors, but none of them reflect your face. They reflect moments. The instant your mother held you for the first time. The laugh that made you fall in love. The silence that forgave you when you thought you didn't deserve it. Each reflection pulses with the same word, not written, not voiced, just there. Whole, complete, known. And now something unexpected. A door, wooden, weathered, breathing, above it an inscription, one word, glowing faintly. You recognize it instantly. It is the word, your word, the one that has lived beneath your skin, echoed in every decision, trembled in every act of courage and every surrender. You can't read it. You don't need to. It is not in your language. It is in your pattern, your breath, your memory, your stillness. You step forward. The door opens without effort. Inside, nothing and everything. The room contains no objects, no images, only resonance. And in that resonance, you hear it, not from outside, from within. The word, not spoken, unleashed. It vibrates through you like light through water. It hums in your teeth, your bones, your heartbeat. It says everything you've never been able to say. It holds your entire life in a single syllable. It is your story, your truth, your becoming, compressed into something beyond utterance. And as it fills you, you begin to cry. Not out of sadness or joy, but from recognition, from reunion. You never needed to speak this word. You only needed to become it. And now you are. The dream softens. The room dissolves. You wake with the vibration still inside you. You do not remember the letters. You do not remember the sound. But you remember how it felt. And that feeling follows you into your next breath, into your next word, into your next moment of silence. And in all of them, the word lives on. You awaken into a world that feels real. The floor holds your weight. The sky holds its color. The objects around you are solid, obedient to touch. People pass, voices murmur, time ticks forward. It all works. It all makes sense. There's no sign you're dreaming. And that's how the dream keeps itself alive, by forgetting. You walk through a familiar city. The names of streets make perfect sense. You know where you're going, although no one told you. The air smells like belonging. Gravity feels reassuring. You talk with someone at a cafe whose face you cannot quite see, but you trust them completely. They speak in truths you've always known. Their mouth doesn't move, but you understand them. They ask you gently, "When did you stop asking if this was real?" You laugh it off a little too quickly, because everything does feel real. The sidewalk, the coffee cup, the weight of your keys in your pocket. You can recall your schedule. You can explain the world. You have memories, a whole life. But now a subtle crack appears. Not in the sky, not in the ground, in certainty. You try to remember something, anything specific, a date, the layout of your bedroom, the last time you cried. But your memory loops, not broken, simulated, real feeling but hollow underneath, a perfect replica of knowing. You begin to wonder, what if this is a dream that doesn't know it's dreaming? The city continues to hum its illusion. Billboards change when you're not looking. Time resets to 4:03 p.m. again and again. You check your phone. It's in a language you don't know, but somehow understand. You look in the mirror. You blink, but the reflection doesn't. The dream is trying to hold its shape. It does not want to be discovered. Dreams, you realize, are not threatened by nightmares. Nightmares remember their dreams. They crack, they scream, they expose. But a comfortable dream, a convincing dream, wants to be mistaken for waking. You sit on a bench as the dream reorients itself around you. You watch it reinforce its scaffolding. A dog barks in the distance. A leaf falls. A child laughs. All very normal. All very calculated. Then a whisper rises, not from outside, but from inside your awareness. You've been here a long time. You try to trace back how you got here. You can't. The beginning is missing. No alarm clock, no transition, just arrival. You realize this is the dream's most elegant trick. Not the illusion of presence, but the erasure of entry. You begin to test the world. You touch a brick wall. It resists. You press harder. It yields briefly, then snaps back. You speak nonsense to a passerby. They smile and respond with a phrase from your childhood. You ask someone what year it is. They say, "It's always been this year." You climb a staircase that doesn't end. You enter a bookstore where every title is your own name. You open a drawer and find a note that reads, "You're almost awake." Almost. The dream begins to fracture. Not visibly, structurally. Patterns repeat. A man walks by again, identical down to the twitch in his left eye. Music drifts from nowhere, looping every 16 seconds. You look up at the sun. It pulses like a blinking cursor. And then the forgetting begins to lift. You recall the real world, not in images but in feeling. A body heavier than this one, a room where the silence breathes differently, a sense of unfinished business. You begin to feel homesick for the waking world. Not because it is better, but because it is yours. But the dream resists. It changes shape, trying to pull you back. It becomes more beautiful, more meaningful. It shows you love, shows you closure, offers you forgiveness, all the things you wanted, all the things you lacked. It asks, "Why wake?" You hesitate because part of you does want to stay. The dream is warm. It makes sense. It gives you purpose, connection, clarity. You consider the offer. But then you remember dreams don't require you to choose, only to forget. And you've remembered too much now. You whisper to no one and everything, "This is a dream." The world pauses, flickers, waits. Then it exhales, a sigh slow and cosmic. The illusion doesn't vanish. It bows. You walk through the city once more. Not because you believe it, but because you're saying goodbye. You don't hate the dream. You thank it for its stories, its comfort, its lies, for keeping you company in forgetting. As you approach the final corner, the dream offers one last gift, a door. It doesn't say where it leads. You open it, and as you step through, you wake, not in bed, not in a room, but into a deeper kind of awareness. You wake into the part of yourself that never forgot. And now, even in waking, you carry a dream that remembers. It was always dreaming. You always thought the body was a container, a boundary, a border separating you from everything else. Flesh holding thought, skin dividing self from world. But in the final dream, you learn the truth. You are not a container. You are a coastline. And beneath that coastline, there is an ocean. It does not roar. It does not rage. It does not crash. It pulses. It listens. It remembers. The dream begins in stillness. You lie on your back, floating. The surface is dark, mirror-like, but not cold. It holds you with impossible gentleness. There is no wind, no horizon, only breath. The rise and fall of your chest matches the swell of the water beneath you. You are not on the ocean. You are part of it. You reach a hand into the deep and find warmth, memory, not just yours, others, generational, collective, cellular. Each drop of water hums with things long thought lost, lullabies from before you were born, instincts you never had to learn, grief passed down like heirlooms. The ocean beneath your skin has no language, but it understands you. It is made of everything you've ever felt but never fully processed. And it's been waiting. You begin to sink, slowly, not drowning, descending. Each layer is a threshold. The first layer is physical. You feel tension held in your jaw, your shoulders, your spine. You feel the postures you've kept for too long, defensive, performative, afraid. You feel them release. The water forgives you. The second layer is emotional. Currents of longing swirl around you, desires you suppressed, pain you softened into numbness, joy you postponed. The ocean doesn't demand explanations. It receives. It expands to hold all of it. The third layer is mythic. Here, the body dissolves. Your outline blurs. You see yourself not as an individual, but as an echo. You are the voice of ancestors, the continuation of stories. You are not just one person. You are a wave formed by countless waves before you. Here, you understand. You are made of tides. The same force that pulls the moon pulls your blood. The same patterns that guide seasons shape your growth. Every rhythm in nature mirrors a rhythm within you. You've always known this, on some ancient cellular level. But the noise of waking life made you forget. Now, in this dream, the remembering begins. You swim through your own interior, not to find answers, but to listen. You touch the place where fear lives, not as an enemy, but as a child who never got to ask their question aloud. You cradle a regret until it stops shivering. You meet love, pure, unstructured, still floating, untouched by expectation. The water carries you deeper. Eventually, you reach the floor of this inner ocean. It is not sand. It is not stone. It is quiet. The kind of quiet that existed before sound. The kind of quiet that dreams are made in. And resting there in the stillness is a shell, small, iridescent, beating. You hold it to your chest. It vibrates, not with words, but with your name. Not the one others use, the one only your soul knows, the one the water has been whispering all this time, the one that means, I was never separate. I was never alone. I am tide. I am vessel. I am storm. I am calm. The ocean does not speak. It pulses through you. You rise again, not swimming, not climbing, ascending as a current. The water does not push you away. It lifts you, carries you to the surface. You emerge, not dripping, rewoven. The boundary of skin remains, but it is no longer a wall. It is a threshold, a shimmering membrane where self meets world, meets memory, meets mystery. You inhale, and for the first time, you feel the ocean rise inside your breath. It has always been there, waiting to be remembered. You walk now, barefoot, newly surfaced, the ground beneath you damp with knowing. Each step feels like a translation, from liquid to solid, from dreaming to waking, from depth to form. But you are not returning to how you were. You are returning as something wider. Your breath no longer ends at your lips. It extends, it echoes, it ripples into the unseen. The dream is different now, not gone, integrated. You glance at your hands. They shimmer faintly, not with magic, but with meaning. You see lines not as destiny, but as rivers, tributaries feeding into the ocean of your being. You touch your chest and feel more than a heartbeat. You feel the pull of tides, the gravity of memory, the weight of stories that do not belong only to you, but pass through you. The body is no longer just yours. It is an instrument, a channel, a coastline where waves arrive and are not turned away. You begin to hear the ocean speak again, not with sound but with intuition, a message rising like heat from deep water. It says, the world within you is not smaller than the one around you. You pause, Let it settle. All your life, you were taught to look outward for scale, for perspective, for awe. Mountains, stars, cathedrals. But now you understand. The sacred was never out there. It was folded into the folds of your body, beneath your scars, beneath your habits, beneath the noise. You sit near a shore that wasn't there moments ago. The sea stretches endlessly. But this time you recognize it. Not as dream, not as metaphor, but as mirror. This is you, the whole of you, and it's still moving. Waves arrive. They carry feelings. One carries forgiveness, salt-heavy, unexpected. You let it wash over you. Another carries fear, but gentle now, softened by its own long journey. You hold it. Then comes wonder, trembling, delicate. You don't speak, you simply weep. You do not try to name the waves anymore. You let them come, you let them go. You sit in the rising light. And then you notice something new, a current forming behind you, gentle, persuasive, not pulling you away, but drawing you back inward. A final invitation. You turn and see it, a pool, small, still, perfectly round, carved into the sand like an eye, watching without judgment. You kneel beside it. It reflects not your face, but your depth. You lean forward. Place your hand on the surface, and the water accepts you. For a moment there is no separation. You are the ocean, the sky, the gravity that pulls them together. You are memory and future, silence and thunder, a wave cresting and crashing and returning again, the rhythm that holds opposites in one breath. You rise, not above, but through. The dream thins at the edges now. The world begins to return, but the ocean does not fade. It moves inward again, beneath the skin, into the blood, into the spine. It carries a promise, softly etched into your waking body. Wherever you walk, you carry the tide. And now, wherever you go, you are never dry, never empty, never disconnected. You move through life as water does, flowing, feeling, becoming, without ever forgetting what you are made of.